Thanks, Clark. Okay, members, you're very welcome to the first meeting of the Assembly Education Committee. I advise us that we will be recorded and broadcast throughout the meeting today in Parliament buildings and online. It can be accessed via www.nsambly.tv/live-stream-1 and on Twitter at NIAssembly. Delighted to welcome everyone to the committee and glad that we're back to get on with our job at hand. Item 1 then is apologies. Have apologies from Maurice Bradley, MLA. Any other apologies? No, got full attendance otherwise, Clark. Excellent. Agenda item 2 then is committee composition. Can I draw members' attention to the committee composition document which has been tabled? Members take note of that, yep. Okay, Clerk. Happy enough. Okay then, in terms of chairperson's business, can I again welcome everyone to our first meeting of the reconstituted Education Committee. I'm sure everyone agrees it's long overdue and that we've got much work to do. As I've said in the Assembly, it is a genuine privilege for me to serve as chairperson of the Education Committee, which gives us the opportunity and the responsibility to support and hold the account, in my opinion, one of the most important government departments that we have. There are, of course, serious challenges facing our education system to which we have to respond collectively, but I think you'll agree that the clear commitments made by all parties represented in this committee in the New Decade, New Approach document, if delivered, is going to help us respond decisively to these challenges for the benefit of everyone in our community. And I firmly believe that education can empower and unite our community through inclusive, equal, quality educational opportunity for all. So I really look forward to working in good faith and partnership with every one of you to achieve these aims. And I'd be glad to give members an opportunity to make their own brief introductory remarks in taking up their membership of the committee, if they would like to. Yeah, Deputy Chair, would you like to make any introductory remarks?
Yeah, I suppose like yourself, Chris, I feel very privileged to be Vice Chair alongside yourself and involved in the committee since I come into this role. I was lucky enough to become the party's education spokesperson, and over the period that we haven't been here, I've done a lot of engagement with the sector, and I suppose, as they say, every day is a school day and every day is learning. The education system here is so vast, and you're learning new things all the time. So I'm looking forward to getting stuck into the work. We have only 2 years. I would like to see us being strategic and delivering on as much as we can within those 2 years.
Agree. Yeah. Members content to move on then? Yeah.
Daniel, Chair, to welcome yourself and also Karen as the Chair and Vice Chair of this committee. It is a vitally important committee and one that I am delighted to be a member of. There's huge challenges, and I've spent quite a number of the last 3 years in the absence of these institutions travelling across my constituency in West Tyrone and meeting with teachers and classroom assistants and principals. And I've heard the huge challenges that they have faced in extremely difficult times. And I would hope that the work of this committee collectively will help and alleviate some of those pressures and steer a way forward which will be to their favour. And certainly today in particular, when we are in the headlines for the wrong reasons in the return of these institutions after 3 years, I know that quite a lot of teachers will be very frustrated by the fact that our Assembly members will receive a pay increase which we didn't ask for, but also in the context that they have been fighting for so long for what they're rightfully entitled to in terms of pay increases. So in that regard, I'm delighted to be here, and I will do all I can to contribute positively to this committee.
Thanks for that, Daniel. I'm sure everybody agrees that resolving those teacher pay and work conditions is an absolute priority for the department and the committee. Could I invite Robin to speak as well?
Thank you, Chair, and join with the previous 2 speakers in pleased to see that the institutions are back up and running again, and indeed that the Education Committee, which is facing huge challenges across the whole and in each and every sector of our education. I suppose we do talk about the cost of education and so on, rather than perhaps talking about investment in education. And I really don't think there is any more important sector of our people than our young people, and indeed how we invest in our young people for the future, because it is only through them that we will in the future have a sustainable economy and a good society. I suppose it would be appropriate, Chair, that we do pay tribute to the teachers at all levels and in all sectors who have and are continuing to do sterling work in difficult circumstances. I have to say I was pleased last week that the first ministerial statement that was made in the Assembly was a statement by the Minister for Education, and that though in the overall context it's not a huge programme that he's introducing with the enhanced schools, but it does indeed, I think, set a scene for the future and hopefully for better things to come, Chair.
Thank you, Robin. Echo those words of tribute to the teachers and acknowledge that I think one of our most earliest meetings will be with the teacher unions. And also welcome the school enhancement programme, of course, as well. I think, as you say, it's very welcome for the schools that receive it, and we'll have to work to get that investment for other schools as well then. Robbie Butler.
Thank you, Chair. I look forward to being part of the Education Committee, hopefully over this next 2 years, and I have every confidence in your ability as Chair to drive us forward. And I do hope that we're in a different dispensation where we are looking at a much more collegiate, collaborative approach to how we tackle some of the real difficulties that this country faces. And I come from my previous mandate on the Health Committee, and I'll make no apologies for driving the topic of well-being and resilience within our young people. I do feel that in terms of how we measure the value of our young people, education and academic ability is right up there, but there can be no better vehicle than schools to ensure that there's a more holistic value placed on our children. And we'll look at the crisis that we're in this country at the moment. There's no doubt that the education system plays a significant role in emboldening and building our young people for a prosperous future here in Northern Ireland. And I think it's really important that when we do that, whilst we will engage with the sector, it's really important we engage with the most important stakeholders, and that's the children and the young people themselves. So, and I know, Chair, that on a number of forums that we've sat on with young people, that there is a voice out there and they want to be heard. And I think that it is for this newly constituted Assembly to deliver on that, to raise the bar for what can be achieved for the young people here in Northern Ireland.
Thank you, Robbie. Any other members? Content to...
Chairman, can I just say,
yes, of course, William. Yeah.
As a governor in 2 schools, one a secondary school and one a primary school in North Belfast, I echo the words of others in terms of school principals, teachers in general, and the support staff that there are in schools who do a tremendously difficult job in difficult circumstances in a most professional and an excellent way. I think one of the other things that the challenge, obviously apart from education, is the general issue of mental health, suicide awareness and general well-being is hugely important. And I think one of the things that we need to be looking at as a committee is how this, the Department of Education alongside Department of Health, the Public Health Authority, local government, the Department for Communities can get a joint approach to tackle these issues. I think that's hugely important, because I know when speaking to school principals and teachers across North Belfast over the last number of years, there is a huge amount of money spent bringing in professional services in terms of counselling and so on, which is hugely important and obviously needed. That's why it's being brought in. But frontline education money is having to be used for that, and I think there needs to be a joint approach to ensure that that isn't the case as we go forward. And congratulations on your appointment.
Thanks very much. Okay, members. Yeah.
Can I just supplement the back of what
Go ahead, Dan.
William has said? Absolutely right in terms of the necessary services to support our young people in schools, and it shouldn't be coming out of a very strained budget. But I'd also like to see in local schools a greater awareness about drug abuse and also alcohol consumption. And particularly with so many young people now, the first thing to do is pass their driving test, get a car, and to explain to them the very serious consequences of driving whilst intoxicated, because there needs to be a greater awareness in relation to that at that age, I would feel, and I think it's a big issue, and it's about to become much larger, particularly when you look at the context of the amount of people that have died in the most recent year.
Okay. Well, members, thank you very much indeed for the commitment that you've given to work together in relation to those wide range of issues facing our children and young people and our education system, and I do genuinely look forward to getting the job done with you. Yeah, sorry, Justin, you want to come in? Apologies.
I'd like to echo a lot of what's been said already and congratulate you on your appointment as chair, and look forward to working with the clerks and the team. We've got a really important role to play, all of us. And I would like to add into the important piece on mental health. I think the really crucially important role sport can play in dealing with not alone mental health, dealing with drugs abuse, as a tool to build and embolden young people to see another route. I think it's a really important piece of education that we all should be cognizant of, and looking forward to working with everybody and doing a really important job that we have to do.
Absolutely. And Catherine as well, yeah?
I would like to echo everyone else and congratulate you both in your positions. I'm looking forward to working with you all. I would just like to mention a couple of priorities for me sitting now in the Education Committee, and that would be to ensure the implementation of the childcare strategy and also the children and young people strategy with a particular focus on mental health and also youth service provision. And I think we have a big job of work ahead, but I think that we can do it and I think we'll work very well together.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, members. And can I also echo the welcome back to our committee staff? Absolutely vital part of the team, and thank you for working so hard to get us prepared for this first meeting back today. Staff, appreciate it. Okay, members, the next agenda item then is our meeting with the Minister. As is convention, the Deputy Chair and I met informally with the Education Minister, Peter Weir, MLA, yesterday. And whilst the Minister is scheduled to meet formally with the Education Committee next Wednesday, 29th of January, we did take this opportunity to raise a wide number of urgent education issues with him, many of which have been mentioned already today. But we covered education reform, teachers' pay and conditions, resolving that industrial action, which includes ETI reform, the sustainable budgets and capital investment needed for our schools, SEN provision with particular reference to seclusion and restraint practices, underachievement and early years and childcare, as has been mentioned, and probably a few others have left out, Deputy Chair, but we'll no doubt get to those in due course. So members then, with that update, we move to agenda item number 4, committee procedures and practices. Can I refer members to pages 11 to 44 of their packs, which include a number of guidance documents, powers and operation of statutory committees for chairpersons and members, powers and operation of standing and ad hoc committees, role of the chairperson, role and function of the Education Committee Office, committee interactions with the department, committee correspondence, questioning witnesses and courtesy in the committee. So can I ask members to formally note those guidance documents and refer you to the clerk's covering note at page 7 of the meeting pack, and invite our clerk to speak to these papers.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.
You rest outside. Yes. Can we just, if members are committee content, just to suspend for a second? We'll get the water and glasses in because you might get a bit
No
dry.
problem. Take a
That's
brief,
okay.
brief adjournment. Yep.
30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30.
So just to recap then, I'm very grateful for the briefing you've put together with regards to committee procedures and practices. We've noted the key guidance documents and very grateful to hear from you in relation to those papers then.
Okay, Chairperson, thanks very much. So I'll just take some time to advise members of procedures and practices of the committee. There's just a few things. For those who have been on committees before, bear with me. I'll get through it as reasonably quickly as I can. For those that haven't, this may be of interest. So just to begin, that the members should note that the committee's role is really around its policy rather than individual cases, or indeed you will be approached, I'm sure, by parents, schools, teachers, governors, principals or groups or individuals. But the committee's role is very much about policy. So although as members you may wish to take up the cases of individual pupils or schools, or with the department directly or with the relevant arm's length body, and you can do so in all sorts of ways, e.g. by writing written or oral assembly questions, and we usually find those turn into a very, very useful resource for the committee anyway. But in terms of pursuing individual cases, that's probably the best way to do it, rather than through the committee itself. I generally wouldn't be able to provide background information on individual cases or be able to verify the accuracy of any claims. You'll note some correspondence, which we'll come to later, in which some claims are made about a school. I don't know whether that's accurate or not, and so it'd be very difficult for me to determine that. So again, committee's role really about policy rather than about individuals, but as MLAs, of course you'll want to take forward individual cases should you choose to. As the chair has indicated, the committee will meet when the Assembly is in session on Wednesdays, so it's usually this room, 9:45, generally about 3 hours. Meetings are mostly held in public session, and they're always televised when we're in Parliament buildings and put on the Assembly website. Generally the proceedings will be in public. If they're not, there'll be some overriding reason, and the committee will be asked. So I presume members are content with that approach, that we're generally in open. In the last mandate, we would have been in open session about, I think it was like 96, 97% of the time. So we keep a careful record of how much closed we do. It's really very little. Just to be aware about the microphones. Now, often this session is done in closed, because I can then give you some examples, but just to be aware, we are broadcasting, the microphones are live, so that everything you say, even things that you might say in an aside to your fellows, will be broadcast, and may not be noticed at the time, but then could be picked up later. So if you wish to comment to your fellows, what you might wish to do is step well back from the microphone, even step outside the room. There were a number of instances in previous mandates where members made remarks to each other, and then, well, it was all over the press subsequently. There's a particularly, it's actually quite an appalling example. It's in another jurisdiction, it's in the Scottish Parliament, where an MSP commented on someone in the public gallery on their appearance. It's dreadful. If it's the reason I mention it is that it's still on the internet, so you can basically hear what he's saying. He's obviously, it's the chair of the committee, he's talking to the clerk. The clerk, I think, is sitting there frozen in embarrassment, trying to get him to stop, but he just keeps talking, and it's so bad. So just to be aware, microphones are on, nothing we can do. Once it's broadcast, it's out there, and it's out there forever. In terms of meeting protocols, it's usual to provide an apology in advance if you are not to attend the meeting. I would understand that close to election time, members might be unable to attend. Your party may actually require you to be out on the stump, of course. We're down to 9 members. The quorum's still 5. That's the decision-making quorum. The evidence-taking quorum is 4. So it only really takes a couple of members to be unavailable for us not to be able to have the meeting. We get paid anyway, but the point is that witnesses may have taken time out of their day, and it can be really inconvenient for them. Yes, officials, but also members of the public sometimes give us evidence as well. So if we're not going to have the meeting, if members cannot attend, good to give an apology. I can then communicate that to the chair, and if necessary, the meeting can be postponed, and thus we can avoid wasting the time of our witnesses. I'll move on then to punctuality. All MLAs are time poor. You all are. I've dealt with this for some years, and I know what you're all quite good at doing is overcommitting, so that you all want to see your constituents, want to do things. Often, I think Carla Lockhart, who was on this committee before, what she used to do is have meetings with somebody at about 8 or 8:30, get in here for this meeting, then she'd go to public accounts, then if we had an event on in the evening, she'd go to that, so she would be going from about 8 to about 9 in the evening. So I understand you're time poor. I understand that you're probably running from pillar to post constantly, but if you're late for the committee meeting, it often means we have to go back over things again. It can be quite inefficient. So that if you can get here on time, I will undertake with the chair to get proceedings done efficiently, and we'll get you out the door by 1, usually. And at the same time, we won't rush either. You'll have a good grounding in the proceedings and the things that we need to cover. I need to do just to tell you a few other things. In terms of privilege, there's guidance on privilege in your packs. Members are asked to note that, under Section 50 of the Northern Ireland Act, for the purposes of the law of defamation, absolute privilege applies equally to the making of a statement in proceedings of the Assembly and the publication of a statement under the Assembly's authority. This privilege also extends to meetings of the committee. So what that means is that it would be possible for a member during the proceedings of the committee to defame someone, to slander somebody. You could do that and escape any proceedings from the court. I strongly advise you not to do that. Again, one of the things we often like to talk about in closed, but the chairperson will ensure that absolute privilege is not abused, and he will stop proceedings for privilege. And also for subjudice, which I'll talk about in a minute. The chairperson has a particular responsibility. So if there, for some reason, did turn out to be court proceedings, it wouldn't just be the member that said what they said. It could also be the chairperson who would be in front of the judge as well. So you'll understand that that's why he might be quite quick to move on certain matters. So in terms of subjudice, again, I'll just have to read this bit out. You should be aware that subjudice falls under Standing Order 73 of the Standing Orders of the Assembly. Subjudice applies for when a criminal charge or charges is brought, or for when notice of an appeal is lodged at to the time the verdict and sentence have been announced, or for when a civil action is listed for trial until judgment is given. In such cases, the matter awaiting adjudication should not be prejudiced by comment in a public session of a committee meeting. I understand that this also includes the coroner's court, so that where there are matters before the court, the committee should avoid commenting on those in public session. I think we're generally okay in private session because it's highly unlikely that a jury or indeed a judge could be in any way influenced by anything we say in private. But just to be aware that the chairperson will have to step in and stop members talking about matters which are before the court. Section 41, Schedule 6 of the Northern Ireland Act applies, and that's where Standing Order 73 comes from. So, usually we can see this coming a long way, so we can be aware of it. But just to be aware, it is up to members themselves to ensure that they don't talk about matters which are going to be before the courts, and which, as I say, are scheduled for trial, as I just indicated. So that's quite the heavy stuff. And again, apologies for members who are on other committees, because you'll hear all that again. They will tell you it, and the reason they do is because it's important. If we talk about our meeting packs, now this week, we got a hard copy pack. What happened was that during the period when the executive was not formed, the Assembly Commission wished to economise, save money, quite rightly too. So they didn't upgrade our sort of little laptops here. So consequently, the electronic committee meeting packs don't work on these anymore. We're getting that sorted out. Will take a week or two. Should be done quite quickly, actually. But so we ask you just to bear with us. You'll be getting paper packs for the next week or two. They're not brilliant, but we think that the new laptops that they will be leasing and members will get, they're actually pretty good, and I think they've got quite a good deal on them, etc. So bear with us for that. But in terms of the meeting agendas themselves, what we usually have is 2 or 3 oral briefings, generally from the department or maybe the Education Authority or others. Some of the policy areas and the related background can be kind of complex, so I'll usually provide a covering note. And this will summarise the relevant background, pick out the key points, suggest possible lines of questioning. Now, obviously, the lines of questioning are entirely optional. You decide what questions you ask, not me. So, but there are just some things that you might want to explore, but you do not have to. All covering notes and submissions from the department and other witnesses will be included in any electronic meeting pack. These will usually be issued to you on Friday afternoon. I'd also suggest, members, that just that when witnesses are giving evidence, you refrain from use of your mobile phones. It's just that people in the public gallery, they're not supposed to be filming proceedings, but they can, and I won't know if they're doing it. So that in other jurisdictions, there have been issues with this where I think somebody in Westminster was playing Candy Crush on their phone. Now, none of you would be doing that. Or on a betting site, or there were other websites, I think, in some other jurisdictions. So none of you would be doing that, but just to be aware, the cameras are over your shoulder. They can see what's in front of you. They can see what's on your laptop. They can see you on your mobile phone. Witnesses could also film you as well. They're not supposed to, but they could. So just to be aware of that. In terms of then other agenda items, in order to ensure focused use of committee time, substantive issues are not dealt with in detail under matters arising or AOB. However, members should use AOB if they wish to raise an issue which they would like added to a subsequent committee meeting agenda. So under AOB, the chair won't allow you to have a lengthy discussion on a new subject which isn't on the agenda. But they will allow you to flag it up so that it can be put on a subsequent agenda. That way, all members see it, and it's on the agenda. They'll know, oh, we're going to be talking about youth services or childcare strategy or what have you. Okay, so this is another bit. Yeah, I think I'll just go to planning. Okay then. So committees usually undertake strategic planning sessions at the start of each session. Usually what would happen, we'd start in June, have a couple of meeting sessions, a couple of good oral evidence sessions, and then we'd have a bit of a planning session in September. I think maybe this time we might do that in about maybe 4 weeks' time, and then again at Easter. At each meeting, the committee will be asked to approve a forward work programme. That's what I'd ask you to do, is that for the meantime, I've devised a forward work programme. It's really for the committee to do that. But since you're all, almost all of you, are new to the Education Committee, I've come up with some stuff which I thought you might find interesting. You may want to change that. Terrific. But then what we'll have is a more strategic planning session going on where the committee, say in a couple of weeks' time, will decide what does it want to do with its time. Because as the chair said, we've only got 2 years. There probably, I understand there'll be a new programme for government in the next 2 or 3 months. There are a lot of big issues around the education transformation programme, so the committee could entertain itself with those things, or the committee could choose to make its own entertainment and basically begin an inquiry or undertake some other areas of study. So those are things I would suggest, park for now, and we'll come back to in a couple of weeks' time. As the chair's already indicated, the committee also undertakes informal meetings, external visits, stakeholder events. We also do focus groups with hard-to-reach groups. And the nature of all of these are agreed by the committee, usually in public session. There's a wee section here just on visits. The committee will probably wish to arrange to have its meetings in external locations. So you may have been contacted by schools already. I think it's a very, very good idea. It's all very well hearing from officials about this policy or that policy, and they're very good, but there's no substitute for going out to schools or the youth provision or the childcare provision or whatever it is, and meeting with the people that actually are involved in delivery. Usually what I try and do is go to a school for a reason, so they've got something to show us, and then maybe we'd have our meeting there as well. We might do that, say, about once a month or so. So the problem is that for our Belfast-based MLAs, it's not going to be particularly convenient, because who knows where we'll be. But then again, for those of you in other places, it might not be that convenient either. So we could be in, a very isolated location in Ballycastle or somewhere. So you then have to find the school, or other places. Other places are available.
Catherine,
so first,
they're used to that. Nothing's convenient where we live.
Yes, well, so you have to find your way to the school, and then when you get into the school, what facilities have they got? They're going to put us into the assembly hall, probably going to be cold, or they'll put us into the library, probably going to be boiling, and there's not much they can do about that. So it may not be ideal, and it's also the case that when we are in a school, there will be no video feed. So that if there was some important issue, education issue which had materialised that day, and you make some important comments on it, there'll be an audio feed which goes on to the website. But in my experience, that's generally completely ignored by the media. Even though important things may be said, they only ever really pick up what the committee says if it's on the video feed, if we're here. So bear in mind, I definitely think very good idea to go out and visit schools. And I'm sure you've been approached already, and we'll schedule those in. But there may be some issue then with the convenience of getting there, and also the coverage that we might enjoy from the media when we do get there.
Yeah, we can obviously coordinate properly, but I do think it is obviously vitally important that we engage across Northern Ireland as extensively as possible, and we did make good use of that in the last committee, and I'm glad that we do have good representation from constituencies across Northern Ireland, and we'll be sure to engage effectively and widely. Yep, thank you, Clark.
So moving on then, just to social media, as the chairperson has indicated, we do maintain a social media presence through our webpage, and also we have a Twitter account. Members also maintain social media presences, I think from time to time they'll retweet what the committee tweets as well. So usually, I think probably after this meeting, the chair might be persuaded to do a short video. Here's what we did today. We'll tweet that out. And we would often do that around if we have events where we bring stakeholders in. We might do a little video of that with members talking to camera, saying what they learned from the experience. So we do that kind of thing. Comms, or communications office, will come along in a couple of weeks' time, and they will give a much better account of the communications and engagement opportunities that the Assembly will provide for committees. So nearly there then. Plenary.
Just on that, Clark, obviously we want to make the work of the committee as accessible as possible. I welcome the fact that there is a Twitter account there, and as I mentioned earlier, the live broadcast can be accessed online. So it'd be good to make sure that communication is as up to date and active as possible. And if any other members, in addition to me, want to contribute to short videos, I'm sure we can coordinate that properly as well. Then, thank you.
So moving on then, just to plenary, members may wish to note that in plenary debates on education topics, the chairperson will often use his part of their allotted speaking time to convey the committee's views or deliberations of the matter under discussion. So what would sometimes happen is, if it's an education topic, the chairperson will stand up, he'll say, speaking as the chair of the education committee, blah, blah, blah. He'll give a couple of minutes, and then he would then say, I'm now speaking as a member of the Alliance Party or whatever, and then he'll give a couple of minutes more. So members shouldn't be surprised by that. I'll usually draft the first bit for the chairperson. Chairperson doesn't have to use what I say, of course, in any shape or form, and indeed doesn't have to speak on behalf of the committee, but may choose to do so. But all that generally happens is the chair will delineate clearly. Sometimes if the chair is unavailable or wishes to speak as just as an Alliance MLA, he might delegate that to the deputy chair. But sometimes if it's something very, very something that members are very exercised about, they might just speak as MLAs and not speak as chairperson at all. And particularly in the early days when we really haven't done any deliberations, the committee hasn't decided its position on, say, education, autism, which is a debate coming up in a week or so's time. So it might be difficult there for the chair to speak to the committee's views on that, though there was some legacy papers around that issue. So that's basically all I have. I'm just going to introduce the team to you. So I'm Peter McCallion, I'm the clerk of the committee. We've Mark McQuaid, who's the assistant clerk. We have behind you there Carla with the glasses, Carla Campbell, who's our clerical supervisor, and Ed McCann, who's just joined us. Bruno on the end is just helping us out today very kindly as we sort of work through this first meeting. So you will have noticed that our staff is in a wee bit of state of flux right now. Over the next few weeks, we'll be settling down back into our usual way of going. So some of the faces may change, but hopefully the quality and the consistency will remain. It was, were we surprised? I think I came up here, I had my lunch here just before Christmas, and met some of my colleagues, and then started saying, oh, I think the Assembly's coming back, Peter, and we were all kind of glad, but also, yes, we were definitely glad, but also a little bit surprised, and then had to sort of get into the way of preparing chairs' briefs, doing all the paperwork again. But we are glad to be back again. And as I say, it's been 3 years since our last committee meeting, so that if perhaps we're not perfect to begin with, bear with us. We'll get there within about a week or so, and should be back to normal. That's all I have in this section, Chair.
Thank you, Clark. Thanks very much indeed for the early briefing on those issues. I suppose members, to recap, members, staff are experienced and skilled advocates and personnel, but I think it is important that we maximise those skills to have as effective an impact on legislation, policy, budgets and services as possible via a planned, coordinated approach to our activity and engagement. So I think many of the things that the clerk advises on and suggests as our approach will help us to do that. Are members content with those issues, or any brief comments or feedback? Robbie, yes.
Just want to thank the clerk for the speed and the manner which we got our file this week, because we're all sort of finding our feet and trying to get up to the speed that we should be at, and I actually think it was quite remarkable what you did over this past week. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Clark, then we'll move to item 5, which is an overview of education in Northern Ireland. How long have we given you for that?
We're zooming through this quite quickly.
Yeah, no, it's obviously important that we do take time to brief ourselves in the detailed and complex system available to us. This is just an initial overview. There'll be many more detailed reports that you have available to you, members, but thought it important that we do set out the remit of the department and the issues that we are likely to face going forward.
Okay, members, if you look at pages 46 to 138 of your packs, that's a document called the Country Background Report. It was 2013 that it was done, but I'm conscious that a lot of terminology gets thrown around, and you'll find officials do it quite a lot. That's actually a really good document. It explains all sorts of things, the very basics, what is a controlled school and that kind of thing. It's quite a good document. It is the department's version of what they do, but it is actually a very useful background. So again, apologies for this. There's quite a bit to go through. If chair's content, if members want to stop me if their brains are full, or if they wish to, if they don't understand something I've said, please do indicate. So I'm just going to give you a whirlwind tour of education in Northern Ireland. So it has a complex educational structure. There's a range of bodies involved in the management and administration. So the Department of Education, as you know, is accountable through its Minister to the Assembly, and the Department's responsibilities are education up to the age of 4 and the childcare strategy, primary, post-primary and special education, so everything in schools, youth service, children and young people, including implementing the Children's Services Cooperation Act, and reporting on the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, so that's UNCRC, which we'll hear mentioned quite a lot from time to time. DE also works with the Department for the Economy to deliver the career strategy, but it's not directly involved in apprenticeships or further higher education, although the Education Authority administers student finance in Northern Ireland. However, this is outside of DE's remit, so it's not inside the remit of this committee. DE is also responsible for the Northern Ireland Teachers' Pension Scheme, which, for historical reasons, includes FE lecturers, but the FE lecturers bit is outside our remit. So DE is not the responsible body in the executive for safeguarding. I think that's still with TEO. However, ETI, the Education and Training Inspectorate, inspects child protection measures, and schools obviously have a lot of responsibility in this area. DE also works with the Health and Social Care Board, which funds Sure Start. So, right, that was kind of complicated. I assure members that we're going to have a series of briefings from officials who will make this a bit clearer, but suffice to say, it's complicated. It's a complicated arrangement. The Education and Training Inspectorate is, unlike any other inspectorate in these islands, not independent of the department. It is part of the department. It is also a unitary inspectorate covering early years, schools, youth service, and I believe further and higher education provision, as well as educational provision in prisons. So D through EA has responsibility for youth education in Hydebank, but not in other prisons. So the Education Authority took over, I think it's what is now an IOTIS education other than at schools setting in Hydebank. The predecessor committee visited that, were you there?
I don't think so, but I think we have had a request to deliver another similar setting that I can raise at another stage of proceedings, yep.
But anyway, it's so again, it's just to set out the complexity. So the committee did visit Hydebank, so they had sort of young people, and there were really quite impressive at that time educational provisions for them in that setting. So the department has a number of arm's length bodies. These include the Education Authority. Now, this is a statutory body, and it basically manages the delivery for most educational provision. It manages the delivery for youth provision, is the managing authority for teachers and non-teachers in control schools and non-teachers in maintained schools. It is the funding authority, I think, for all teachers in all schools. Okay, so what does that mean? They pay teachers, they do the pay and rations, but the managing authority in Catholic maintained schools, I understand, is still CCMS, the Council for Catholic Maintained Schools. So, moving on, the Council for the Curriculum Examinations and Assessment, CEA, is a statutory body. It advises on the curriculum and examination, and also, uniquely, acts as the regulator for examinations in Northern Ireland. The Council for Catholic Maintained Schools, again statutory, is the managing authority for Catholic maintained teachers and promotes Catholic education. The Northern Ireland Council for Integrated Education, not statutory, but it helps DE meet its statutory obligation to promote integrated education. So not a statutory body, does receive funding from the department, but does have a statutory, it helps the department fulfil the statutory obligation. Corlin na Gilscoileachta, not statutory, so this is SENA G, helps DE meet its statutory obligation to promote Irish medium education. This again was in receipt of funding from the department, I think it still is, and this is a matter of public record. It was in special measures for some time. I think that has now been resolved, but I haven't actually had an update on that in a while. The General Teaching Council, Northern Ireland, statutory body, registers all teachers in Northern Ireland. So you can go onto a website, if any of you have children at school, and look up your child's geography teacher. If you put in their surname, it should come up with their registration number. If it doesn't, that's interesting. Well, they're supposed to have a registration number. Nobody's supposed to teach in a school in Northern Ireland unless they're registered. So that, say, a teacher does something they really shouldn't, they can then be deregistered. So as well as being sacked and whatever, and subject to disciplinary procedure or what have you, there are vires which allow, I think, the department to ensure that that teacher cannot then go back into a school. There was an issue with this a couple of years ago, which I'll tell you about another time. So then we have Middletown Centre for Autism. This is jointly funded by DE and the Department for Education and Science in the Republic of Ireland. It provides advice and training for parents on autism, parents in schools, on autism in Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. Then we have the Youth Council for Northern Ireland. Now, its responsibilities were transferred to EA, to the Education Authority. I think it had started to happen during the last mandate, but I understand from the department's annual report that the Youth Council no longer has a board. So I anticipate that the department may have to bring forward legislation to dissolve that body. So all the Youth Council stuff is happening, I understand, in the Education Authority, but the Youth Council still exists on paper, is my understanding, though there is no actual board. Then we have, finally, the Exceptional Circumstances Body. This deals with post-primary admission problems. In addition to all of those, there are sectoral bodies. For example, the Controlled Schools Sectoral Council. This promotes controlled schools and is funded by DE. Then you have the Transfers Representative Council. So to explain, controlled schools, right, so to explain this properly, I understand that in about the 1920s, the Anglican Church got out of education all over the world. So in Australia, Canada, UK, Northern Ireland obviously, they no longer ran schools, and they handed those over to the state and said, there you go, there's a school, look after that, on condition that they maintained a seat on the board. So these seat on the Board of Governors of the school, so that these transferors then have a representative body, which is the Transferors Representative Council. To be clear, they're not all Anglicans. There are, of course, Presbyterians, Methodists, Baptists, etc. But that is the group that I think represents the, you might say, interests of the Protestant churches, and they're mostly concerned around controlled schools. Then we have the Catholic Schools Trustees Service. That body was set up just about the time that the executive collapsed. I think that's a representative body for the Catholic bishops and also the religious orders that would have established Catholic schools. I presume it would include, I'm not absolutely sure about this, but I presume it would include like the Irish Christian Brothers, the Dominicans, etc., that would be involved in Catholic schools. Not absolutely sure about that. It might just be the bishops themselves, so we might get an update just to see exactly where they are. And then you have the Governing Bodies Association, representative body for voluntary grammars. Now, in addition to those, there are some other bodies representing special schools and groups of schools in an area, and also there'll be an Irish medium schools representative body as well. So, lots of organisations. Many of them will want to come and speak to the committee at some point. If they haven't spoken to you already, I'm actually surprised. But sitting below all of these, and with responsibility for their own school in terms of spending and admissions, are the boards of governors of schools. Some of you, I'm sure, are governors of schools. They are constituted a little differently in the different sectors, but essentially they enjoy a reasonable level of autonomy. The voluntary grammar schools probably have the most autonomy. They're able to procure services, etc., which, say, controlled schools cannot. And this was mentioned during the Minister's statement on the School Enhancement Programme, and this one comes up again and again, that schools are adamant that they could procure services much more efficiently than the Education Authority does. But again, that's something I'm sure we will return to. So the key teaching unions are the NAHT, so that's the National Association of Head Teachers, INTO, Irish National Teachers Organisation, NASUWT, National Association of Schoolmasters Union of Women Teachers, UTU, Ulster Teachers Union, and NEU, which is the National Education Union, which used to be ATL, the Association of Teachers and Lecturers. They merged with the NUT, a year or more ago. So these organisations are all on the Northern Ireland Teachers Council. So they would have been involved in the, I imagine they would have been involved in the industrial action, the pay dispute, and the resolution of same. The ASCL, which is the Association of School and College Leaders, is not on the NITC, but certainly the committee has had dealings with them in the past. Non-teaching staff can be represented by NIPSA, for example. ETI inspectors are, I find it a little strange they're represented by NIPSA, and classroom assistants, often by NIPSA as well. Unison will also represent some of the Education Authority non-teaching employees, and as the Chair will recall, in the last mandate, we had representations from both NIPSA and Unison around the outdoor education centres, and they're representing their employees there, their members there. So that was quite a lot. I'll now take you on a further whirlwind tour of the different sectors and just give you some of the numbers. So beginning with the controlled sector, probably the largest. About 47% of children attend controlled primaries. Maybe 40% of children attend controlled post-primaries or controlled grammars. They generally have transferors on their board, except for the controlled grammars, which do not. Not quite sure why. So something we discussed in previous mandates, what is a controlled school? A controlled school is a school which will have a daily communal act of worship which shall be Christian in nature, so that this is always a source of either concern or amusement to some members that controlled schools don't have a Christian ethos. Of course they do, but under law they're not required to. Under law, all they're required to do is to have this daily communal act of worship which shall be Christian in nature, which is kind of interesting, and sometimes this sort of issue materialises. So a small percentage of children at controlled schools are Roman Catholic. It's around 12% at primary and about 4% at post-primary. Interestingly, a reasonably large group, a growing group of children, 7% in the primaries and I think 17% in the post-primaries, are no religion recorded. This is something that came up in the shared education bill. We talked about it. It seems to be an increasing thing. What is it? Who are they? Are they the children of Protestant parents who don't go to church and have chosen to not record themselves as Protestant? I don't know, but that is a feature which you will see in the changing demographics of our schools. Excuse me. Catholic maintained schools account for about 46% of primary school children and 47% of secondary school children. These schools are recorded as having a Catholic ethos. Voluntary grammars with a Catholic ethos account for around 45% of grammar school children, and almost all children at Catholic schools are Roman Catholic, so it's about 96-97%. There'll be a small percentage which are Protestant or some other religion. Integrated schools, these can be sometimes called grant maintained integrated or controlled integrated, where it's been a controlled school which may have converted. Account for about 6% of primary school children and 16% of secondary school children. According to the Department of Statistics, no integrated schools are recorded as being grammars, even though, members will be aware, some integrated schools do use academic selection for some or all of their, well, certainly some of their admissions. Irish medium schools are usually designated as other maintained, but they can also be, they can certainly be controlled. I'm aware of at least one that was controlled. Most Irish medium schools are primary schools. There are two post-primary, Coláiste Feirste in Belfast and Coláiste Gura, which is in Dungiven. There may be others sort of in the ether that are forming, but those are the only ones I'm aware of. There are perhaps 3,500 children in Irish medium schools. There are also a small number of other maintained schools, so that is schools with a Protestant ethos. So there was at least one Anglican ethos, at least one Presbyterian ethos, a primary school. That was before the executive collapsed, because, sorry I keep referring to that, but because there was no committee during the last 3 years, I haven't been allowed to ask questions, or, well, I could have asked questions, but the department doesn't have to answer me, so I didn't ask any questions. So consequently, some of my information, I'm having to rely on public domain stuff from the department. But as members start asking questions and we start getting oral briefings, my sort of background information will get more and more up to date. So I'm looking forward to lots of assembly questions from members. In terms of grammar schools, they account for about 40% of the post-primary population. So that's about 63,000 children. So, question, what is a grammar school? You might say it's a school which uses academic selection to determine its enrolment. Not actually the case. There are a number of schools with grammar in the title which don't use academic selection or only use it for some of their enrolments. Additionally, there are some schools which make use of academic selection for enrolment or some of their enrolment, and they aren't termed grammars. So about 50% of children at grammar schools are Roman Catholic. About around 51% of the overall school population is Roman Catholic. So by and large, primaries enroll children at age somewhere between the age of 4 years and 3 months and 5 years and 3 months. Keep them for 7 years, and off they then go to post-primary. The only exception I'm aware of is Strandtown, which is Northern Ireland's largest primary, 1,000 children. It enrolls at the end of primary 3, I think, and has a number of feeder schools who deal with the P1 to P3. So as I say, very big school, 1,000. Also, in terms of post-primary...
Didn't foresee my old school getting a mention in your early day briefing, Peter.
There you go. There it is. Didn't realise you were the former pupil. I'll also make just a passing reference to the Dixon plan. This is a different system for post-primary than is used throughout the rest of Northern Ireland. I'm sure members that are interested in that will raise that, and I know there are champions of that within the Assembly. So post-primary, in terms of the costs, it's around £4,500 per pupil. Primaries is about £2,500 per pupil. Staying on levels in post-primaries in Northern Ireland are actually pretty high. They're certainly as high as they are, or higher than the rest of the UK. Various reasons for this. One of them may be that employment opportunities might be a little lower in Northern Ireland than they are in the rest of the UK. Children leaving education with no qualifications appear to be pretty low, so it's less than 1%. However, maybe we'll might treat that statistic a little bit carefully. I'm not clear whether all children with SEN are included in those numbers, but the overall picture from things like PISA, which was a recent study on the state of the understanding of reading, etc., at pupils age 15, and other studies. There was a recent, 2013, the OECD did a review of education in Northern Ireland. The general finding is it's good. For 80% of the children, they do really well, they stay on, they get reasonably good results in their GCSEs, but there is a long tail of underachievement. And that's, if you were to characterise our education system in that way, in a sentence, that's basically where they are. In terms of, sorry.
Just before you move on from that point, through Chair,
Go ahead, Robbie.
with regard to how they record the performance of school leavers, I know that some schools are criticised because what they do is they only measure those that sit exams, and there are those that sit outside and don't take exams. Are you aware of, in terms of that figure, does that encompass every pupil that goes through the system, or is that just the performance of those that sit exams?
In terms of, it's a good point that the member makes. In terms of the GCSE, probably less the A level, but more the GCSE performance, I think there's around 1,500 or so pupils that are excluded from the statistics. So maybe there's 30,000 odd children who are taking their GCSEs every year. Those are, so whenever you see the numbers of how many have got their 5 good GCSEs plus English and Maths, that's based on that 30,000, but excluded from the statistics are this group of around about 1,500 who have special educational need. So that's why I'm saying we should treat the statistics with a little caution, because there's probably a little more to that. And this is something that members, I'm sure, will question the department about.
Just in terms of the clarity around that, I know that a big part of the proportion of 1,500 will be SEN, but
yes,
some of them won't. Some of them will be also wrapped up in that figure, I would imagine, through their circumstance or the fact that they're not academic, perhaps just, and that they've chosen to maybe to avoid that. And I don't need to get down on it at the minute, but I think it is really important that when we look at this in the holistic sense, that we're comparing apples and apples.
Yeah, I think who is included in those statistics and what statistics we measure to be regarded as achievement and attainment are definitely ongoing important issues and ones for us to look at, so we can definitely do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
yeah. Sorry, members. Are you flagging a little here, members? If you'd like to refresh yourselves or something, because this is going on a bit, but about halfway.
You're getting on rightly. Keep going.
Okay.
Okay, I'm conscious that it is an awful lot of information. It is a bit dry, but when we hear from the officials, hopefully it will then come to life when the Minister comes to see us next week. So in terms of special schools, these are almost all designated as controlled schools. I think St Gerard's Resource Centre is down as a Catholic maintained school, but there's about 6,000 pupils in controlled schools. Now, before, about 3 years ago,
In special schools, you mean? Yeah.
sorry, yes, 6,000 in special schools, not in so special schools in the west of Northern Ireland tended to enrol at 4, and then the pupil would leave at 19. But there was an awful lot much more variation in the rest of Northern Ireland. So the west was basically the old WELB board area, and that's the way they did things. I think there was a feeling that that was actually quite an efficient way to run special schools, that there was a good deal of consistency of delivery. And the Education Authority was looking at the standardisation of the special school model a couple of years ago. Where they've actually got to with that, I'm not sure, and it might be something that members may wish to pursue with the department. In terms of costs, special schools probably cost about 120 million a year to run. The cost per pupil comes out at about £18,000, with another £3,000 on top of that for transport. So if you compare and contrast that with mainstream schools, where it's maybe about £4,000 per pupil. But members have visited special schools a number of times. When you get there, you can see how different it is. I'll choose my words carefully, but I mean, members usually come away from it really impressed. That you find that there's maybe one classroom assistant per 2 pupils, and the pupils have a wide range of sometimes very, very challenging physical and behavioural issues. So anyway,
Yeah, no, special educational needs provision was a key priority of the previous committee. As you say, Clark, we visited a number of schools and took evidence and scrutinised a wide range of issues in relation to SEN, and I've no doubt will continue to do so in this committee as well.
Indeed, Chairperson. And then moving on to youth. Around 150,000 children and young people participate in youth provision, small statutory sector but a large voluntary sector. So this would include the uniformed organisations, so the Scouts and the BB and the GB and all that good stuff. The provision includes anti-sectarianism training, outdoor learning, inclusion programmes delivered through youth centres and sometimes with and in schools. It accounts for about 32 million of the 2 billion education budget. So sometimes characterised, I think, by former Deputy Chair as the Cinderella sector, that it's, but it is, it doesn't command a large amount of resources. There were issues in the previous mandate around the rationalisation of outdoor education centres. I think that was resolved, but again, I'm sure members will return to that.
Yeah, I think in our capacity as education spokespeople during the absence of the executive, we were briefed by the Education Authority on the new youth services model, but I think it is in the draft forward work programme to take a detailed briefing of the configuration of the new youth services. I'd be keen to hear an update on the outdoor education centres as well at an early date also, so that is in the draft forward work programme.
Okay, members, so then moving on to money. The Department of Education's opening resource budget for 1920 was 2,063 million. 0.2 compared to the 16-17 opening figure of 1,948 million. It's quite hard to get your head round. I find it quite difficult to get a head round when we start talking about millions and billions. It is complicated. Suffice to say, education is the second largest AME budget, resource budget of all 8 departments plus the Executive Office. Health is of course first. The opening resource budget figure that I've just quoted for education included confidence and supply funding of about 16.5 million to cover some of the costs of Sure Start, literacy and numeracy projects, nurture provision, early years pathway fund and extended schools. So the numbers, again, as I say, are quite hard to get your head round. I will attempt now to break these down for you if I can. So 1,129 million of DE's total expenditure is accounted for by the aggregated schools budget, the ASB. So you'll hear that mentioned a lot. It's allocated to schools using a formula or scheme called the Common Funding Scheme. You'll hear this mentioned as well. 80% of this is based on the number and type of pupils that schools have. Thus, more pupils and more pupils on free school meals means more money for the school. Schools do not get money for vacant places. So when you hear it said that there are 30,000 vacant places in schools in Northern Ireland, it's not the case that the department or the executive is paying for empty school places. They're not. They only pay the schools for the spaces that are filled with actual pupils. Post-primary schools get more per pupil than primary schools, as I've indicated. It's not quite twice as much. A relatively small proportion of the ASB, about 20%, is allocated by the department or the Education Authority for other reasons. For example, targeting social needs, that accounts for about 77 million. The premises factor, 65 million. The small schools factor, 20 million. Now, the small schools factor is allocated to a relatively large number of primary schools with small enrolments and is often argued as being essential to their sustainability. So you have, for example, the school in Rathlin. I think there's about 8 or 9 pupils at it. It's not practical for those children to commute to Ballycastle. So basically, in order to make that school viable with only 8 pupils, they need some extra money, and they get it from the small schools factor. The issue then with that is that if you then start to look at the cost per pupil, when you get into some rural areas, that cost starts to go up because the school has got a small number of pupils, and you find then that the school can only afford maybe to employ 3 or maybe 4 teachers, so classes have to be combined, etc. So big debate about that, and you can have that another day. But other funds are held centrally by the Education Authority or DE and cover other provisions. For example, school transport, currently about 81 million, school meals 38 million, special educational needs 250 million. So in that 250 million number is the classroom assistance number, which the audit office estimated to be, I think, around 50 million. So those are significant sums. The SEN, special educational needs budget, has increased by at least 30% in the last 5 years. Since I've been clerk, it's consistently gone up. That's one of the issues, one of the pressures that the department is facing. So other background, the terms and conditions of teaching staff are understood to be just about identical in all grant-maintained schools. This is sometimes referred to as the Jordanstown Agreement. So if we meet with the unions in future, you'll probably hear them mentioning this. Staffing costs are significant and account for about 90% of school expenditure. So if you look up your school, I'll point you to a website where you can see how much money schools get. So if you had like 1,000 pupil post-primary, you could have a budget of 3 or 4 million easily. But it might be employing 70, 75 teachers. The median salary for a teacher is about 40,000, and on top of that, you have to pay your employer's national insurance and employer's pension costs. Once you've used that up, they're down to a couple of 100,000 of sort of available cash for the school to spend. Then they have to pay their rates bill. Then they have to heat the school. Then they have to light the school. Then some of the special educational needs provision they may have to provide themselves, so that you're not long whittling down that 4 million to 50,000 or something, so that if then the enrolment drops in the school and thus the amount of money they get changes, suddenly they're in deficit. That can happen quite easily. So that's sort of the background, as I say, to the money. And just to point out that although it sounds sometimes like schools have got stacks of money, by the time you've paid the teachers and your administrative staff and your classroom assistants, where those are employed by the school rather than the Education Authority, you might not have very much money to play with after that. So as I've just indicated there, schools or managing authorities also pay employers' contributions for teachers' pensions. Owing to changes made by HM Treasury to the discount rate for public sector pensions in 2016, these costs increased, and school and managing authorities had seen their contribution rise by 30 million per annum. So where has this problem of the deficit come from? Well, you can trace it back to 2016. So you have the teachers' pension scheme. There's like a discount rate. This is kind of involved, so I'll just give you the very high level. Basically, schools' pension or teachers' pensions costs increased. Teachers had to make bigger contributions themselves, that's fair enough, but schools also had to make larger employers' contribution. Add that all up, £30 million from 2016. So that put a bit of pressure on the budget. Additionally, sorry, I've lost my place here. Additionally, there were changes to employers' national insurance contributions, also from around 1st of April 2016. That increased the cost of employing a teacher by £1,100 per teacher, so that's 21 million. So there's 50 million, which they didn't have to pay before. And it's not, without making a political statement, not the executive's decision, not the minister's decision, not the school's decision. They just had to pay the 50 million from somewhere. So that's kind of where we've come from in terms of the pressure on school budgets. Additionally, there's the issue of staff substitution costs. This is associated with teacher absence. This is now running at about 73 million per annum. So the costs associated with the first 20 days of sickness absence, and those can be as high as £200 a day, have to be met by the school. So again, if you go back to my original, started off with 4 million, paid the teachers, lit the school, heated the school, paid the rates. Now you're going to have to, or you've paid these additional pension costs and national insurance costs. Oh, now you've got teacher substitution costs as well. You're rapidly getting into, it's not quite that surprising that maybe schools are struggling to balance their books. As members are aware, teaching unions have been in dispute over pay and other matters since at least 2016-17.
Just briefly, Clark, as well, I suppose, just to stress our appreciation of the scale of the financial crisis for school budgets, and to acknowledge that the New Decade, New Approach document puts addressing sustainable school budgets as an absolute priority, as it will be for this committee as well. So thank you for raising that, Clark.
Thanks, Chairperson. Yes, they're in dispute. If they got a 1% pay increase, I would estimate that to cost about 10 million. And the money for that would have to either come from the ASB, the Aggregated Schools Budget, or somewhere else. So there'd have to be some money settled on the department, some extra money to settle whatever the final pay dispute settlement is. I don't anticipate that it will be 1%. I would have thought it would be more than that. So you are talking about serious money. So as I'm sure the Minister will say when he comes, there are a number of big financial pressures, not of the making of the executive, which now have to be resolved.
And as I mentioned previously, Clark will be meeting with the teacher unions urgently in relation to that matter. Yep.
So the Northern Ireland Audit Office undertook just a review of all of this. They found that in 16-17, 396 controlled and insane schools had budget deficits, and this was totalling about 39 million. So that had roughly doubled in about 5 years. Around 7 post-primary schools had individual deficits in excess of 1 million. Now, the Audit Office report also reported that a school had a deficit of 7 million. I think that school may be closed, I may be wrong. The largest primary deficit was around 400,000. So the Audit Office also estimated that about a third of voluntary grammar and GMI schools were also in deficit, and that was amounting to around 14 million. So this is, the reason I just dwell on this last bit is that's a little bit surprising. If you remember what I told you, how schools get their money is from the number of pupils. Voluntary grammars usually have very healthy enrolments, so how can they be in deficit? So that is kind of surprising. So further questions then for the Minister and his officials when he comes. So moving on, and thank the member for bearing with me, we'll get into the capital programme. The capital budget in 16-17 was 206 million, so it was the third largest of all the departments, and this covers things like new school building, school improvements, and includes things like maintenance and, of course, the school enhancement programme, which you heard about last week. The 1920 capital figure was given as 150.7 million, so still a big spend. As members are aware, under Fresh Start, the UK government was to make an allocation of 50 million per annum for 10 years to support integrated and shared education capital programmes. The money could also be used for shared housing, it was said. It was understood. At the start, they said that only new projects were to be funded using this money. However, under the confidence and supply arrangements, the Stroul campus, not a new project, had already been started, was expected to receive support from Fresh Start. That's a big deal for the member from Western Ireland. Its total cost is about 140 million, and so that would be I'm sure predecessors committee approved of that development, but that would be a, inverted commas, good way of spending £50 million for 2 or 3 years on what is a shared education project. But it was just to make clear that the department had sort of struggled to get its capital budget spent on new school builds. That Minister might, in good faith, make an announcement: we're getting a new school for this place or that place, and then owing to planning reasons or area planning reasons or disagreements on the ground, the school didn't get started or didn't get built. And there were a number of instances of that occurring. So what the department did was they spent their capital money, and they spent every pound of it, I believe, but they redirected it to other things, to school enhancement programme, for example, and also into minor works. So it will be interesting to see where the department is now in terms of its capital programme. Is it still struggling hard to get new school build money spent? And if you think about, if you were trying to build a school, it would take you a while. You would need a pipeline built up, and there would be projects that would, if you like, it's not like football, they would be in the Premier League, you're going to build them, but then things go wrong, and then they get relegated to second division or Vauxhall Conference, and are unfortunately never heard of again. So,
Clark, can we request details of the expenditure on the Fresh Start integrated and shared education capital programmes for those previous years? Yeah.
Yes, Chair. I think the plan is that next week, when the department comes, that I've asked the director of the capital programme to come along and to update members on that and just where they are.
If they could just provide us with the detail of that in advance of the briefing, that'd be great.
Okay, very good. So, sorry, members, I know this is really hard to sit here listening to me going on, but that's the capital bit.
Just before you go ahead, is it possible for us to request an update on the Strail Education Council?
Certainly, yeah.
I know that I have met a good few times in the last couple of years with John on it, but it would be good now that the Assembly is back up and running to get a response from the Minister, whether that's at next week's meeting or whenever it is.
Sure. I'll hope that it will be at next week's meeting, because it is, the members right, it's a huge project, essentially 140 million, it's a very big deal for Omagh, 5 schools, I think the special school is there already. The committee visited it years ago, and it was really, it wasn't even a building site then.
So if we can get the detail breakdown of what expenditure has gone into Strail and an update for the ongoing budgeting, and then all other expenditure on the shared and integrated budget line as well, then that'd be great. Content. Sorry, Robbie, yeah, go ahead.
Not to put any sort of fly in the ointment, but with regard to the previous capital overspends in terms of all the projects and stuff, another point to note for next week is the confidence in that the projects are going to come in on budget and as appropriate, and if not, then an explanation as to why that's not the case.
Indeed, and I think the members referring to the Audit Office review of some of these projects, example Strail being one of them. So yes. Okay. So
let's ask those questions. Yeah.
Okay. So if members are happy, I'll motor on. We're nearly there. So let's just briefly talk about the programme for government. So this was the 2017-22 programme for government. So just to remind you, there were 14 high-level outcomes, which later were whittled down to 12. One of those was, we will give our children and young people the best start in life. All of those outcomes were supported by 42, later 48 indicators. So for education, one of those was the quality of education. With each indicator, there was at least one measure. So you've got at the top level, give our children a good start. Next level, quality of education. Below that, school inspection results. So there was to be an annual outcomes delivery plan which set out what indicator measure owners were going to do to turn the curve by way of related actions, and an annual measurement annex for each indicator was also going to be published. Now, I think during the time that the executive was down, this went on for a while, but then stopped, I think, in 18-19 in terms of the delivery plan. The measurement annex stopped for education, as far as I can see, in 2018, but some other measures did continue to be reported, like around justice. It was also the case that whenever the executive was last in place, that some of the related actions were not fully fleshed out. So, for example, DE indicated that it was going to establish a nurture programme. Well, did they do that? Well, yes, they did. I think there were about 30 schools, according to some updated information I've seen, that did benefit from nurture support. But the other educated-related aspects of the PFG were, and it's a bit of a list, excuse me, developing a school or system-level dashboard of educational attainment measures. So what this was about was schools didn't really like just being measured in terms of GCSE outcomes, and that there was much more to school and what you get at school than what GCSEs, getting your 5 good GCSEs, including English and Maths. So they wanted something better, a bit more meaningful, which also recognised the situation they're in. Members will be aware of schools that serve deprived areas. They don't get the absolutely best GCSE results in the world, but they do a really good job for those children that they get. And it was about that. Another measure was going to be developing a digital learning in schools programme. They were going to review the early intervention programme, so there were things around Sure Start that were to happen. And again, exactly where these are, I'm not exactly sure. They were to develop a nurture programme for schools. I understand that happened, certainly for 30 schools. They were to implement the childcare strategy, including improving access for children with disabilities. There was, with the Department of Health, to be a developmental assessment for all children at 3+. Not sure if this has actually happened. They were also considering extending free childcare for up to 38 weeks for all 3 to 4-year-olds. That was in the old programme for government. And they were to implement the recommendations of the career strategy with their colleagues in Department for the Economy. And the department was also going to deliver TBUC activities, including the Stroll Shared Education Campus, and there were summer camps and things, which I know definitely did happen. And they were also to develop a new children and young people strategy, which, as the members probably aware, they've done, that's been published. So that was the old programme for government. Our understanding is that under the new DNA, the new deal, new approach document, what they're going to do is devise a new forward work programme, and the key points in that for education are...
Can I just a second, Clark, in terms of the previous draft programme for government? Obviously we have the Minister with us next Wednesday. For me, there can't be anything much more important for a government, a department, a minister, than setting out in a planned way what you want to achieve and monitoring whether or not you're achieving it. Is it possible, if it isn't the intention of the minister or the department, to make sure in their briefing next week that we get an update as to progress on the programme for government outcomes, indicators and measures that apply to education, and in particular the update with regards to the delivery plans for 17, 18, 19 that would have been then, and those particular key issues that you left out as well. Members content with that? Yep.
Content?
Okay.
Really good. Thanks, Chairperson. So the key bits in the new decade, new approach are, and the Chair's referred to them already, firstly, resolving the current teachers' industrial dispute, indicated what that's likely to cost, well, in terms of, I say, a 1% salary increase, but I have no idea what the final settlement will be. Members might also wish to consider whether any settlement will also include other staff, e.g. Classroom assistants. Additionally, one of the other points in the new DNA document was about addressing resourcing pressures in schools to ensure schools have a sustainable core budget to deliver quality education. So, as I've just indicated, a large number of schools were showing budget deficits last year. Situation probably going to get a bit worse if they don't get any more money, I would have thought. Interestingly, the department's transformation programme indicates that it's considering a review of the common funding scheme, which, as I said, is the formula that is used to determine how money is allocated to schools. So, moving on then, within the...
Sorry, Clark, as well, an update on the review of the common funding formula scheme in that brief would be helpful as well. Thank you.
Okay. Just to advise members, there is no time scale given on that review of the common funding scheme. And
the department have initiated an internal review of common funding formula scheme, either informally or formally. It is ongoing. Yeah.
There we go.
So we could get an update on that. No problem.
Chair has the better of me, right? Right, okay. So, another point was establishing an external independent review of education provision with a focus on greater efficiency in delivering costs, raising standards, access to the curriculum, and the prospects of moving towards a single education system. There have been other reviews. There was an OECD review on attainment and standards. That was in 2013, initiated by Minister O'Dowd, which was generally, I think, actually very positive. Also, just to point out to members that within the transformation programme, there is a work strand entitled Delivering Schools for the Future. And this is about accelerating area planning, developing a new process to replace development proposals. In the longer term, the project is to change the future network of schools to comprise of fewer but larger schools in order to maximise resources and provide equity of access to the full range of curricular and extracurricular activities. So at the briefing next week, members might wish to ask the department, is there an overlap between those two different objectives? So moving on then, within the UDNA document, there's a undertaking to support educating children and young people of different backgrounds together in the classroom. Members are aware that there are a large number of shared education projects and programmes. There's quite a lot of money had been made available, so it may be that that's linked to that. Another objective was to establish an expert group to examine and propose an action plan to address links between persistent educational underachievement and socioeconomic background, including the long-standing issues facing working-class Protestant boys. So, again, members may wish to ask them where they are with that. and what the the anticipated timescale for that may be.
Could we ask, Chair, if you're indulged, could we ask for information around that to be provided next week if possible?
Yes, yeah, indeed. I will, Chairperson, with the committee's agreement, I'll write to the Minister, formally inviting the Minister, but also asking that the officials come along and they pick up some of these issues that members have mentioned, and hopefully we'll get a response.
Can I just ask, Chair, I can't remember work being done outside of Belfast on that issue. Is there work from further afield?
In the rest of
Achievement pros and boys.
That is a very good question. I can't remember whether Iliad was just Belfast. You remember that? There was was just Belfast.
Yeah, I think
No.
there are
And there.
have been a number
Was
of
it?
reviews,
Yeah.
obviously. Yeah, yeah.
Outside of Belfast?
Yes.
Yes, so I think Iliad,
Yes.
if you remember that report, which was published
Yeah.
just in
Yeah.
2017.
Yeah.
I remember going to briefings about it, and apparently the member tells me it was also in the Northwest.
Okay, all right.
So there's something there on that. Another key delivery.
Clark as well. Sorry, we previous committee had obviously initiated an inquiry into underachievement, terms of reference for which will be referred to later on. So that is something that we could potentially reinstate in line with that piece of work. But we can come to that later. Yeah.
Okay, Chair. So also within the new DNA document, there's a significant undertaking to deliver a new special educational needs framework and addressing particularly the issues in the Audit Office report. So the Audit Office report says quite a lot about measuring the progress that children achieve as a result of SEN interventions. That compares with other jurisdictions where, say, the level of statementing would be an awful lot lower. So, interestingly, the Department's transformation programme, SEN work strand, is actually about reducing the number of statements and maybe moving some of the stages of SEN assessment back to the schools. But again, like I'm just quoting from their website, what members may wish to do is to question officials appropriately next week. Additionally,
sorry, Clark again. Special educational needs provision was probably the single biggest theme that we dealt with in the last committee, and as I said, no doubt will be at the forefront of this committee as well, to the point where we had considered an inquiry into special educational needs provision, and if memory serves me correct, protocol prohibited us from doing so, whilst the Northern Ireland Audit Office was considering special educational needs provision, the report for which had to be considered by the Public Accounts Committee before it could be considered in public by other committees. So would it be possible to check that the Public Accounts Committee has consideration of that report on its forward work programme and a timescale for that, in case we would want to consider any other actions in relation to SEN going forward?
I'll do that, Chairperson.
Yeah.
Committee can take
Chair,
Yeah,
as,
sure.
as chairman of the
Oh, right.
Thanks. Meeting with the Audit Office and with the clerk the other day, I asked them to make that one of the
Okay.
priorities for the committee.
There you go.
Right, and there you go.
Live update.
We have our answer, yes.
It's helpful, thanks,
But
William.
that's a big in tray that they
Chair,
have.
can I just ask, the work that has been done in England, Scotland or Wales, can we have that made available to us?
Yep.
In anticipation of this work being completed?
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Sorry.
Yeah, there were quite significant recommendations out of that, Robin, I think, none, at least in relation to additional funding, I think, as well. So, yeah, we can source and provide those materials.
Okay. Also within the new DNA document was an undertaking to develop an enhanced approach to careers advice, curriculum training and apprenticeships. So this, the Department under its transformation programme is working with the Department for the Economy on a new 14 to 19 strategy, and this is to be, it's according to their website, is to be launched, an interim launch anyway, in March 2020. So you'll notice it on the draft forward work programme. We'd sort of penciled that in for then. So I know that members have been very interested in the 14 to 19 strategy for a very long time. So maybe we actually see something on this now. Also within the...
Quickly, Clark, sorry, as well. In endeavouring to inform myself of the tools available to the committee in the short time that we have left in the mandate, I'm aware that it is possible for committees to sit in joint session, and perhaps members could consider the merits of a joint session of the Education Committee and the Economy Committee to hear an update in relation to the 14 to 19 strategy from both Education and Economy officials. We can bring that back to the committee for confirmation in due course, but if members could have a think about that, and we'll revisit that. Yeah.
Okay. So also within the new DNA document is an undertaking around tackling paramilitarism. This is also in the programme for government. So it's not, again, there are various measures, as I've already mentioned, through the youth provision, etc. Also in new DNA is a undertaking to publish a childcare strategy. And to deliver extended, affordable, high-quality provision for children aged 3 to 4. So something like this was in the previous programme for government. So exactly where they are now with this in terms of what provision?
Been there since I became an MLA in 2010, I believe, Clark, but we're hopefully edging closer.
So there we are. Additionally, there was an undertaking to publish a children and young people strategy. This is done. I've seen this.
Yes.
So, but it is, it's described as a core strategy. But I don't know
Yeah,
if it's very much new.
So, well, no, the Children and Young People strategy work originated in the OFMDFM and OFMDFM committee scrutiny. There has been extensive work in it. I think it was published as a departmental cross-departmental strategy.
Yes.
I believe it will be formalised as an executive strategy with the restoration of the executive, and it links to the Children's Services Cooperation Act, which requires departments to produce an annual report as to how they are cooperating in the delivery of children's services. I believe that requires the formal publication of the Children and Young People strategy as an executive strategy to be able to start with annual reports. But I think we also have a forward work programmed session on an update on that strategy and the Children's Services Cooperation Act from the departmental officials. So I'm sure that is something that we'll want to get into in more detail, and we can in due course.
Indeed, Chairperson, and it is in the draft forward work programme, as you say. Also within the New Decade, New Approach document, there's a new legal duty, or to be a new legal duty on DE to encourage and facilitate Ulster Scots. And there's also reference to an Irish language and Ulster Scots strategy. What those will actually mean for the department, I'm not sure. There's currently an obligation to provide curricular material for the Irish medium, but I guess there will be a new one on Ulster Scots. But exactly what that's going to look like and where that legislation is, don't know. They'll maybe be able to tell us. So that was a very, very quick gallop through all of the education issues. I would suggest, Chairperson, that members take a few briefings, and their head stops spinning after this. Take a few briefings from officials. The Minister might actually make things a bit clearer next week, as will his officials. Also, when we have a wee bit more clarity, perhaps on the resolution of the teachers' pay dispute, timescales of the programme for governments. Hopefully we'll know that within a couple of weeks, and consequently the committee can plan its strategy after that for what it would like to do, and as I say, undertake a strategic planning session, decide whether you want to do an inquiry on how you want to use the very short mandate that is before us.
Clark, sincere thanks for that extremely detailed first day briefing. The complexity of the education system in Northern Ireland is in itself one of the key challenges, and I know members will be aware and experienced of a number of the issues that you have raised and a number of the structures that you have raised, but I think it is important for us to work from a starting presumption that it is best for us to get as detailed a briefing on those matters as possible, as you say, in order to inform a coordinated, focused, effective work programme going forward, the draft for which is already looking to achieve that aim. So I'm very grateful for that. Members, any brief comments or questions in response? Yeah, Justin?
Yeah, thank you very much, Peter. Very thorough briefing, and I like the concept new DNA. That's definitely some new DNA around here. Few questions. The measurement annex you say has been stopped for education in 2018. What does that refer to?
Right, so there was, so you have your try and get this right. So there was an outcome, which was we give our children a better start in life. Then there were some measures and indicators. So, for example, improving quality of education. And how would you do that? How would you actually measure that? Well, you measure that through school inspection. So the idea was that the department would then publish the results of all of the of school inspection. So they would look at every school in Northern Ireland, well, not every school in Northern, but all schools that were inspected, and they would give an overall indication of what the quality of educational provision was like. And these would then be published in an annex every year, and this would be on the NISRA website. And it, as far as I can see, it happened for a while, and then it stopped. In the particular case of the school inspection, there was industrial action by teachers, so that the inspectorate then struggled to make any. They struggled then to conclude the inspections in a number of schools because teachers would not cooperate with them under the industrial action. Therefore, in previous years, they would have been able to say, we inspected 200 schools. 150 of them were good, 20 of them were poor. But because of the industrial action, they couldn't do that. They went to the schools, they inspected them, couldn't conclude the inspection in many cases, not all cases, and thus couldn't give those overview statistics. So thus, that information couldn't be recorded. So there was one problem, which was the industrial action, but then it also seemed to be that something seems to have been decided centrally in the civil service while the executive was down to stop reporting against the programme for government, it would appear, as far as I can see. Now, maybe if I go onto the website now, it might all have just appeared, but I was looking, and we were looking for this, while the executive was down, keep ourselves amused.
I think it is one of the most important matters for us to follow up though, yeah. Justin?
Okay, also you mentioned capital budget. I know you're specifically speaking about integrated education. In terms of new bills and schools enhancement programmes, which have been in the pipeline for a long time, particularly in my own constituency, there are 3 schools which spring to mind: Joseph Cross McDane, St Malachy's, Armagh, College Land. Could we get a list, could we request in advance of the Minister's arrival next week, a list of the schools that have been earmarked for capital bills and school enhancement programmes, and see where they are scheduled, when they are scheduled? That would be very helpful. Also, we're talking a lot about measures and metrics, and we've mentioned deprived areas, and you mentioned also in relation to A's, B's and C's at GCSE, which is a true metric of a young person's education, and maybe possibly not. Is there a metric for parental involvement in education? I say that because I'm just happened to be reading Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers, whereby it's clear that the kids do better where there's a heightened parental involvement, where parents engage with them about what's happening at school on a daily basis. Is there a metric which tells us how well parents are engaging with their kids, and then how that impacts their outcomes?
I'm not aware of such a measure, but if the committee's content, I'll write to the department and ask them.
It's a pertinent question because parenting NI are doing a lot of work at the moment and are in the process of establishing an all-party group on parental participation in education and a blueprint for parental participation in schools. I think one provision of which includes campaigning for the level of parental participation in education being a measurement that is inspected via the school improvement and inspection process. So certainly a good question to ask of the Minister, and potentially one organisation, Parenting NI, for us to formally or informally meet with at some point as well.
Okay. I think actually now that you've
that makes
reminded
sense.
me, no it does, because I seem to recall in ETI reports it would be something they would have looked at, was the level of parental engagement. We certainly talk to the children, and I think they also, I don't know whether they actually publish a number, you know what I mean, but they do when they're inspecting schools. I'm fairly sure they do. Let me stop guessing and start writing to the department and just ask them to clarify on that question. And is it the case then, Chair, that the committee would like an informal meeting with Parenting NI at some point in the future?
I think so, yeah. Content, yeah.
Otherwise, thank you very much.
Thank you, Justin.
And Daniel?
Yep, Daniel?
I had it in a bit briefly there, so I'm not sure if this had come up, but in relation to the teachers'
Keep
pay,
you right.
it's one of the key aspects that is continually coming up because of the frustration within schools and amongst the wider sector. So I think it's important that we do seek an update even prior to the Minister's visit as to where they are with this pay dispute, and also as to whether there has been any money secured in the New Decade, New Approach agreement for that pay dispute. I think it's 70 million. I'm not sure if that's right, but I was scanning through there to have a look.
The BBC quoted, the BBC quoted that number. My understanding is that's what the executive away day is about. They're putting together a paper about these matters. But if the committee's content, happy to write to the department and ask them to tell us what they can as soon as they can.
Yep, agreed. Yep, okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, William?
Yeah, Chair, you mentioned earlier about a joint meeting with the Committee for the Economy. I think it would be useful for this committee to have a joint meeting with the Health Committee in relation to the issues that I raised earlier, in terms of the mental health, suicide awareness, general well-being, because certainly in Greater Shankill, North Belfast, there's a huge issue in terms of sadly young people taking their own lives. And I know that Father Guy Donegan, the former priest from Holy Cross, has raised this in the last week, in particular an article yesterday in the Belfast Telegraph. And I think this is something which we need to have as I said earlier, a joined up approach around, and I think it would be useful for this committee to meet with the Health Committee, see how we can try and achieve that, because obviously there, as well as the Health Committee, there's the Public Health Authority, local government, Department of Communities and so on, but I think a good start would be if this committee was to have a joint meeting with the Health Committee.
Yeah, William, I'm supportive of that. We do also have the power, if you correct me if I'm wrong, Clerk, to establish ad hoc committees which can include more than one committee as well. In addition to seeking a joint meeting with the Health Committee in relation to this, perhaps in line with a number of calls in relation to mental health, perhaps Assembly committees could consider an ad hoc committee on mental health, given the scale of the issues that you raise, William. But certainly we can take that away and maybe have a further discussion about that as a matter of urgency, obviously. Yeah.
I think just again to follow on from William's point, and I think most members of this committee will absolutely agree with his concerns in relation to the young people of his constituency and indeed across the entirety of Northern Ireland. I'm hearing more and more in visiting teachers that they feel that their role has shifted hugely in the last number of years. And I'm talking about teachers that have been there from I was at school, and they feel as though they're now almost counsellors in school, dealing with the crises that those children are dealing with in their everyday lives. They're bringing them to the classroom, and that's adding real issues for the schools and how to deal with that, because there really is no provision to support those young people. And in doing so, when a teacher is diverting their attention to that particular person in need, they're then leaving the other children, I suppose, at that moment in time. So I think it is something that this committee could lead on very strongly and send a very powerful message, and working with the Committee for Health as well in doing so and trying to tackle these issues.
It's my understanding that officials in the Department of Education are working closely with Public Health Agency officials on a new emotional wellbeing policy for the Department of Education, and we do have a briefing on that from officials scheduled in the forward work programme, but it might be a matter that we want to bring forward in the forward work programme, given the urgent nature of it. But that's something that we can discuss. Yeah.
Do you want to do that as a joint meeting with the Health Committee?
I think that would be useful, but I do think these are only starts. I think this is such a huge problem.
I agree. Yep.
It cuts across government and local government, and we need to try and ensure that the maximum amount of resource is put into it, that we don't have duplication or wastage, and that resource is targeted. Because as I've said earlier, Chair, I've spoken to school principals who are having to use frontline education monies to bring in professional counselling, because they may well not be qualified, their teachers may not be qualified to deal with these issues because they are so acute and so large in number. So I think with the more joined upness there is around this, more resource and more cooperation we can get around these issues, the better for our young people in particular.
Agreed. Yeah. Yeah, Robbie.
Just one point, and I think it's absolutely fantastic. Fantastic to hear the combined approach that we have on this matter. And I think that the important thing in terms of when we do embark on something is that we recognise some of the excellent work that has already been done, and that we don't suffer from a paralysis by analysis. There are some excellent pieces of work already carried out by the Children's Commissioner, and that they already would probably form a big part of that discussion going forward. So in terms of that, if there was the likelihood of forming an ad hoc committee or so, and that in terms of that advisory piece, I think Coola would be very useful in terms of evidence.
We're scheduled to hear from the Children's Commissioner as well, so I think we've got the urgent issues in that forward work programme. Perhaps exactly how they're programmed is something that we need to look at. My apologies, I should have called the Deputy Chair, Karen Mullen there.
Thanks. Just following on from William and everybody else's contributions in terms of that, can we ask, I say we have EA coming in for an oral briefing. EA was to establish a working group in relation to taking the work forward that was in the Protect Life 2 strategy. So that was their role. I had tried to get an update before this and I hadn't, so if we could ask them on that day to give us an update where we're at on that, and it would be helpful before a joint meeting. And it's very, very important that we progress on that, and I don't need to rehearse the issues that have been came up earlier. Just thinking about today's briefing and the amount of work and the department coming in next week. We're only going to have the Minister for an hour, so we probably need to get a second session booked in as quickly as possible. But I think that we need to be strategic about the priorities for next week. We know that there's a lot, and there's a range of issues we need to tackle, but there is priorities that we need to get information from the Minister next week. So if the committee was in agreement, I know, Peter, you have put some in there, but we've already mentioned in terms of the industrial action, and I think finances and school budgets coming out of today's executive planning meeting. I would hope that the Minister would have more information on that, and obviously that leads on to the teachers' pay and the industrial action as well. I think there are two key things that we need to talk to him about. We've talked here today about capital, which is important, and the update maybe on the transformation programme, because there's a number of work streams onto that, including the common funding formula. And I think we need to be a bit coordinated on that. Because if we venture out, we're not going to get over maybe the main priorities for the first hour. But I do think if everybody's in agreement, we ask the Minister to come back pretty quickly in the next couple of weeks to go over all our.
Agreed, yeah.
So, Chairperson, just to clarify, the plan, what I've asked the Department to do next week is that the Minister and Permanent Secretary would come together at 10 o'clock. They'll do an hour. And then I've asked that the two Deputy Secretaries, the Finance Director and the Capital Director, they then come after that. So they could stay for like an hour and a half or so, because I think there's quite a few things. So I think the Minister might deal with the high-level stuff, but we might be able to get down into a little bit more detail with Deputy Secretaries in the Grade 5s. Okay?
That would help.
Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Deputy Chair. Any other members? Any further comments on that? No. As we know, there's a wide range of extremely urgent, extremely serious issues there, so thank you for your engagement on all those matters that, as Deputy Chair has said, we'll bring in front of the Minister in a coordinated way next Wednesday, and through ongoing engagement as well with other committees and organisations. Okay then, item 6, members, is our declaration of interests. Can I refer members to page 140 of their packs and advise members that all Assembly members are required to register relevant financial and other interests in the Register of Members' Interests, and details of registered interests are published on the Assembly website. I'd also remind members that in addition to this requirement, Standing Order 69.5 states that a member who has a financial interest in any matter, or B, a relevant interest in any matter, must declare that interest before taking part in any proceedings of the Assembly relating to that matter. In particular, there is a requirement to declare any interest which might reasonably be thought by others to influence the members' approach to that matter under consideration. So can I inform members that proceedings of the Assembly does include meetings of the committee, and advise members that as this is the first meeting of the committee, members should ensure that any financial or other interests which relate to the remit of the committee or which are likely to be relevant to a substantial part of its work are drawn to the attention of the committee. And it should be noted that failure to register and or declare an interest may be an offence under Section 43 of the Northern Ireland Act 1998. So can I ask therefore if any member has any interest that they wish to declare at this stage? Yeah.
As I've already declared them on my members' notes, but member of the Board of Governors for Cologne Primary School, and also an officer in 1st Macrogall Boys Brigade, even there's no second or third. Macrogall is not a big place.
Okay, thank you. William?
I'm a member of the Governors at Edinburgh Primary School and the Belfast Model School for Girls, and President of North West Belfast District Scout Council.
Thanks, William. Okay. Okay, members. Myself. I'm not on the Board of Governors. I'm on Eastside Learning Partnership, which is a education partnership in East Belfast. As I'm about to invite others, will also reflect further in terms of declaration of interest and consult, as I would encourage members to do, the rules governing the registration and declaration of interest, which are contained in the Code of Conduct, and guide to the rules relating to the conduct of members, and advise members that further advice and guidance is available from the Clerk of Standards in room 254 of Parliament Buildings if any member needs further help or guidance in relation to adhering to those codes in terms of declaration of interest. Okay. Intent. Okay, members, then item 7 on the agenda is subordinate legislation. The Education Committee tends to consider a modest number of statutory rules and subordinate legislation. I don't believe that there is any subordinate legislation or statutory rules for consideration by the Education Committee at this time, although I think special educational needs legislation does require regulations to be progressed in the near future, so we will be prepared for that. But I'd refer members to pages 143 to 146 in their packs, which includes guidance on the consideration of subordinate legislation and statutory rules, and ask members to formally note the guidance documents. I'd also advise members that the Assembly's Examiner of Statutory Rules undertakes the technical scrutiny of subordinate legislation, leaving the policy scrutiny to the committee. So in order to facilitate the above, can I put the following motion to the committee? That the Committee for Education, under Standing Order 43, resolves to delegate to the Examiner of Statutory Rules the technical scrutiny of statutory rules referred to the committee under the above mentioned standing order. The committee further resolves that in carrying out this function, the examiner shall be authorised to report technical findings on each statutory rule to the Assembly and to the relevant department, as well as to the committee itself, and to publish the report. Members content to agree?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you. Okay, item 8, members, is the Education Committee Legacy Report. I would refer members to pages 148 to 172, where a copy of predecessor committee's legacy report is included. This includes a summary of suggested issues for scrutiny, and I would ask the clerk to speak to the legacy report.
So, Chairperson, now as you indicated, the legacy report is there for members' information. We got through quite a bit in the previous mandate, the previous full mandate, including a review of the Education Training Inspectorate. There was an inquiry there with lots of recommendations which we think may be relevant in the coming weeks. associated with the resolution of the teachers' pay dispute. In addition to the legacy report, members may also wish to note that in 2016-17, the committee did spend quite a lot of time on special educational needs, looking at the work of the Education Authority, but they also agreed the terms of reference of an inquiry. Now, the inquiry was around to review the nature of educational underachievement by school pupils in primary and post-primary, with a big focus on the experience of marginalised groups, to identify the barriers to and enablers for educational underachievement, including the impact of academic selection and post-primary transfer. We were going to look, as we usually do, at models of good practice in other jurisdictions, and consider what sort of recommendations would be needed to help particular marginalised groups like looked after children, etc. We'd actually had launched a call for evidence, and we were going to start actually seeking oral evidence in March 2017. We were going to use children's focus groups, which were moderated by Assembly Research. There were going to be youth panels provided by the Children's Law Centre, and a parental touchstone group. There was quite a lot that we were going to do, but unfortunately that did not happen. Additionally, we're thinking about undertaking fact-finding visits. I don't think we were thinking about a specialist advisor at that point, but the idea was that it would be focusing on this important issue of educational underachievement. As indicated earlier, it's a short mandate. There are big issues, particularly around money. There's also issues around a new programme for government. So I anticipate that there may be a backlog of policies, for example, special educational need, things that we'll see in the DE transformation programme, which might keep the committee quite busy. So what I would suggest you do is keep your powder dry for now. Give it a couple of weeks. We'll have a planning session in about 4 weeks' time. And if you're then minded to undertake that inquiry or a different inquiry, then I would suggest to think about that then. We could just about do it within the 2 years, but it would be quite an undertaking. The ETI inquiry, I think, took us about 14 or 15 months, so we would need to make up our minds certainly before the summer. But as I say, I would suggest, Chairperson, that members keep the powder dry for now. Take the briefings that we get from the department, and we'll look at this again in the not too distant future.
Yeah, thanks, Clerk. I think we should reinstate that inquiry. Our forward work planning session is going to be very soon, I think in the next few weeks. So I appreciate what the Clerk is saying in terms of giving members an opportunity to digest a wide range of information and issues that have rightly been raised today. But I think given the work that went into agreeing the terms of reference, which were agreed on a whole committee cross-party basis without any disagreement, have been well worked on. The issues remain pertinent issues, and I think we could make a very decisive start to this inquiry, as you say, in the short time scale that we have available potentially as a committee. So I'd ask that members give that consideration in advance of the planning session that we will have in due course, and I'm glad to take comments or feedback on that now as well. Yeah, Deputy Chair.
Chairperson, I would second that. I think the preparatory work has been done. And it's very, very important that we hit the ground running and tackle it. And it is mentioned within the New Deal document, looking at educational underachievement. So I would definitely second that.
Any other members? I suppose while members are having to think about that as well, I'd emphasise, obviously, as we alluded to earlier, much work has been done in relation to educational underachievement and increasing attainment. The purpose of any inquiry is always to make specific recommendations for action, which at this stage is obviously key to these particular issues. So we would already have a tight terms of reference. There would be clear timescales including receiving oral evidence. And that to me is the added value that a committee can add to this particular issue, in that we can take open evidence from a wide range of people in relation to this, including people that have already done substantive work on the issue, in order to try and coordinate it together in a report that makes specific recommendations for action. So I'm grateful for that response, Deputy Chair. And as I say, I think if members are willing to consider that, we could perhaps move very quickly to reinstate that inquiry further to our formal planning session. Robbie?
Yeah, okay, Chair, just at the fear of making myself look silly, and that I have absolute confidence in what you're saying, but the information isn't within this pack in terms of the committee to reach us or not. So,
okay.
In terms of that, looking forward to the next couple of weeks, could that be then forwarded to us for the new members, especially to get over the detail of?
Absolutely.
I think it's a very important piece of work. And would be of a mind at this point, but I think it would be really useful, because there have been emergent issues since that was initiated, and I'm sure it won't, in terms of the forward work plan, there may be 2 or 3 priorities, and that may be number 1, but it's if we could have a look at that. That's
Yeah,
thank you.
we'll definitely do that. I would just say very briefly in response, there absolutely are other key priorities. I think they can be dealt with in potentially different ways other than an inquiry, and I think this particular issue, an inquiry can add value to this particular issue, given its format. But absolutely, there are other key issues there as well. Obviously, yep. Robin. Yep.
Yeah, can I just say, Chair, when you ask about opening remarks, I made the comment around, we talk about cost of education rather than investment in education. When we come to address such an issue, we talk about addressing underachievement. Maybe we should just think about another way of going about it, and that is enhancing opportunities as opposed to addressing what is a fact of failure. And children who do underachieve don't underachieve because of themselves as individuals. They underachieve by circumstances, in many cases circumstances, in which they are born into. So rather than the negative aspect, Chair, perhaps we could give some thought to addressing it in a positive manner, which might indeed enhance our opportunity to secure additional investment for the matter.
Yep. Yeah. Agree, Robin. I think words and terminology matter. One of the key terms in reference of the inquiry was actually to identify barriers to and enablers for educational achievement. So yeah, maybe we can consider some of the details of the terms of reference in that planning session to make sure we set off on the right foot with the right aims ahead. Yep, understand. Anyone else? No? Okay, members then. That takes us on then to agenda item 9, committee papers. Can I advise members that, as indicated at page 174 of your packs, the predecessor Committee for Education considered a wide range of relevant issues and obtained a large number of related papers, which may usefully inform our deliberations on our current committee. So can I advise members that in order to access these unpublished papers, members need to formally resolve to do so. Members have any views on this matter, or are they happy for me to put for a formal resolution of the publication of those papers? Content?
Yeah, content.
Okay. Then the formal resolution is that the Committee for Education agrees to access and publish, as appropriate, all unpublished papers obtained by the predecessor committee. Agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay. Okay. As was mentioned previously, our next item was intended to be ministerial briefing, but that has kindly been rescheduled for next Wednesday, the 29th of January. It is due to an important executive planning session meeting taking place today. Agenda item 11 then, members, is correspondence. I would refer members to pages 193 to 299, where we have 11 items provided under correspondence. Most of these items are correspondence which was generated in 2017, immediately after the collapse of the executive, and a summary note is included as item 11.1 at page 193. Clark, do you want me to go through each individual item? Yeah? Or to do so?
I can if you like. Or
Yeah, if you want to speak to the items,
members-
yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So ordinarily, members, what we do here is I just ask you about the index sheet, and if you weren't happy, you could pick out what you want. But just so that, as it's the first go, we'll just take you through it. So the first item is 11.2, is at page 198, is a response from the Education for Sustainable Development Forum to the previous committee's inquiry into education underachievement, which we were just talking about. So it's just what I'm obliged to do is put it before you and ask you if you're content for it to be published on our committee website, along with all of the other previous submissions that we got. We didn't get very many because the executive collapsed just after we launched the inquiry.
Great,
Agree
yeah,
with that?
agreed, yep.
Secondly then, is a response at page 200. Sorry, Bill, I'll go too quickly. At page 200 is a response from the Education Authority regarding transport charges. So the committee is to receive a briefing from the Education Authority on 4th of March 2020 on home to school transport. So again, this information is well out of date, but can I ask, Chair, is the committee content to note this?
Agreed.
Yep.
Agreed, yep.
Lovely. Then at 11.4, so we're now on page 203, this is correspondence from the Education Authority providing its Section 75 quarterly equality screening reports for October 2016 to December 2016 and April 2017 to June. The information is, again, well out of date, so I can ask if the committee is content to note.
Agreed.
At page 210 is a Strategic Investment Board investing activity report. The committee is asked to be aware that I've asked the SIB to reinstitute a capital progress report for the Education Committee for next month. So what that is, it's a list of all of the capital projects, including the new school builds and the school enhancement. So you should be able to read down it, and hopefully we'll have it in colour in the future. That will show you who's green, it's green, orange and red is what you get. So you'll be able to track things in your constituency and elsewhere. So if you're happy then this report is ancient. They stopped sending them to me from about January 2017. I've asked them to start again. Should have it next month. Or the committee content to note of what they have.
Good that that's been reinstated, Clark, yeah, agreed.
Agreed. Very much. Yep. So page 210 is correspondence from the department providing a response to the Public Accounts Committee, the predecessor Public Accounts Committee, regarding a student finance whistleblower. I'm not sure that it is actually whistleblowing. I think they're commenting on activities around student financing, which the Education Authority has responsibility for, but which are outside of the remit of this committee. This has all been noted by predecessor Public Accounts Committee, and I think the Committee for the Economy as well. I think they got copied in as well. So that being the case, and it is well out of date, are members content to note? Noted.
Agreed.
Very good. Page 222 is a departmental consultation document on online applications for free school meals and uniform grants. Again, well out of date. If members are interested in this, we could seek a briefing, but are you content to note?
I think it would be useful to receive an update as to the outcome of the consultation, but content to note that document, yep. Agreed.
Lovely, thank you. Page 223 is correspondence from SD Little. He writes to us from time to time on, they write to us on environmental matters from time to time. The committee is asked to note and and if they're happy for me to forward it to the department to respond to the correspondent directly.
Yes. Agreed.
Great.
No relation.
It's different, spelled differently. Page 225 is correspondence from the Northern Ireland Commissioner for Children and Young People regarding the review of the Children's Mental Health Services. I preliminarily arranged with them for them to brief the committee, hopefully in March, on the outcomes of that. I think that might be a wee bit early, just chatting to them yesterday. I think they're probably not going to be done to about the 31st of March. So are members content to note that on the understanding that it will be in your forward work programme?
Yep.
When they're ready to come?
Yeah, noted.
Good. Page 230 is notes from the Joint Consultative Forum meeting of 17th May 2017. It's a body which the Education Authority puts together as stakeholders. Again, they stopped writing to me about that time, so it is out of date information, or the committee content to note.
Yeah, it does, however, contain pertinent issues in terms of saying frameworks, children and young people strategy, and Education Authority strategic plan. So I'm sure those are issues that we will return to, but
That's all 3
content
years.
to note that document, yeah.
Also then at page 280 is the Executive Office Brussels report for April to June 2017. Again,
Noted.
noted if that's okay. Great.
Agreed. Yeah, sorry. Agreed.
Well done. And then we have at page 298 correspondence from the Attorney General for Northern Ireland congratulating the Chair and Deputy Chair on their appointment. Committee content to note.
Very kind of him. Noted. Yep, agreed.
And then, members, we get tabled items. If you look at your table pack, there's some documents marked restricted. So, they're marked restricted because the content of the documents may cause distress to an individual. So I have guidance which tells me how to mark the document up. So to explain, if someone were to send me a document marked confidential, I wouldn't necessarily treat it as confidential if it doesn't meet our rules. This will, yeah, it wasn't actually sent as confidential, they just sent it. So what it's referring to is a school in Belfast, and it's correspondence from concerned parents. Now some of the, and it's fairly lengthy, some of the information in here is of very serious allegations. I can assure the committee that the predecessor committee wrote to PSNI and the CCMS regarding these serious allegations. The committee was assured that all necessary measures had been taken. Can I ask, therefore, as the other allegations, which were a lot less serious, are well out of date, if the committee is content to note?
Yeah, Clark, is it possible to provide the committee by way of restricted papers again, with written confirmation from the bodies that were contacted or otherwise that the allegations have indeed been processed appropriately and that all necessary measures have been taken?
Would it be content for me to write to CCMS about that? Would that,
Yeah,
that would suffice?
I think it would be helpful just to get up-to-date confirmation and assurance that all allegations have been dealt with. I realise that you have received that previously, but I think it would provide a further degree of reassurance if that was up-to-date. Are members content with that approach?
Yeah, and that takes into context that I think the last communication there was January 2017, is that correct? And then has there been anything since? Okay.
So I think, as the clerk advised, that the matter has moved on, but given the seriousness of it, I think it would provide some reassurance to myself as chair and committee members just to receive that confirmation in an up-to-date way.
Okay, Chairperson, no problem.
Agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed, okay.
So, Chairperson, can I ask if members are content to either store or dispose of the restricted correspondence carefully, or alternatively leave it in your place and we'll dispose of it carefully, if that's okay?
Yeah, I think once we receive that confirmation, content for committee staff to process those papers as appropriate. Okay. Is that okay? Yep. Yep. Agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you.
So if there's any other items of correspondence, we've made a wee list there about the number of press releases, and there are also some annual, well, there would have been 2 or 3 annual reports that we have. We can certainly send members links to them if they want.
What page was that at again? Sure.
So that would be at page 194 of your packs. You can see there's a long list, well, fairly long list of press releases. And,
so will that, under correspondence, it be routine to list correspondence and news releases and publications? Okay. From my own perspective, members, I noted in the publications, there's obviously a wide range of them that have taken place in the interim. Integrating Education in Northern Ireland report of the Independent Review of Integrated Education was published, I believe, on the eve of the election in 2017, so hasn't actually been presented to the committee as such. Obviously the Children and Young People strategy as well, and the Audit Office report on special educational needs updated that will be received by the PIC committee. I think it is in the forward work programme, but members be content to receive a briefing from the Department of Education on the independent review of integrated education? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. That's great. Okay, members, that brings me to the forward work programme then. I refer members to the draft forward work programme, which has been tabled. Under normal circumstances, the committee generates our work programme, but very grateful to the clerk to give us a good decisive start for having put a draft forward work programme together and to assist us with this process. Can I seek members' views in respect of the draft forward work programme? Clerk, do you want to speak to the next few weeks as drafted?
Yes, so Chair, I think the first thing is that today, actually, the Chair and Deputy Chair will meet informally with the environmental officials in Rathgale. It's just sort of a meet and greet, which we usually do. Next week then, what I've asked for is Minister and Permanent Secretary to come at 10 o'clock. Officials then, so 2 Deputy Secretaries, Finance Director, Capital Director to come at 11 and talk members through all that. The idea, that's going to be the Wednesday the 29th. The Education Authority Board meets once a month. Its next meeting is the 30th of January. They meet in interim. So they've invited the committee to come along and sort of meet with them at lunchtime on the Thursday. That may not suit some members because they may be in other committees, but it would just be an informal hello meeting with the Education Authority, because hopefully the Chief Executive will come on the 5th of February and talk about, well, basically tell us what the Education Authority does. It's a lot, plus all their financial issues. And what I sort of sneaked in there as well was a briefing about the youth sector, and I think members had mentioned other things too. We'll give them a heads up and ask them to talk about those things as well. So that should get us started. We're hoping that around about then, so my idea would be that around Tuesdays at lunchtime, we'll try and pencil in some informal meetings with stakeholders. So we'll provide a light lunch. So that means you will come out of plenary, come in for a quick meeting with informally with stakeholders, tea and sandwiches, and then back out to question time at 2 o'clock. So there'll be a beginning and an end. And then I'm kind of hoping to, haven't arranged this yet, the teaching unions just to come up and in an informal session just to indicate where they are with things.
Did you, Clark, just recalling a suggestion, there was a proposal to attempt to have that meeting with the teaching unions in advance of the ministerial briefing next Wednesday. I would require it, I presume, to take place next Tuesday, which may be a tight turnaround, but are members content to try and bring that meeting forward by a week, if at all possible? Agreed, yeah.
We'll have a go. Well, it'll be depend on their availability. But sure.
We made good use of informal meetings in the last committee. I realise it is challenging to identify dates and times that is going to work for everybody, so I think we'll do our very best to ensure that is possible. I know that all party groups will most likely use that Tuesday lunchtime slot as well for meetings, so we'll try and liaise with members as best possible to make sure that those meetings are suitable date and time for people.
Okay.
That okay, Clark? Yeah.
Yep. So then on the 12th of February, hoping we'll have our closed session where we'll talk about our committee's strategic planning, and additionally a briefing on the 14 to 19 strategy. And I had chatted with the economy clerk about making that a joint meeting. They've to come back to me. It'll depend on the other committee. I'd also put in there about having a long gallery event for stakeholders. Maybe I'm being a wee bit previous here. Maybe if we could just delay that for a couple of weeks to give members an opportunity to become a bit more familiar. Sorry, no disrespect to the education spokespersons, but some of the other members to become a little bit more familiar with some of the education issues. Just when the stakeholders come along, they'll probably expect you to know quite a lot of stuff. So
again, we used those types of roundtable stakeholder engagement events effectively. In particular, one, for example, was with special school principals, SEND coordinators in schools. So I think they can be utilised effectively. I think it is best when we have targeted particular stakeholders in line with a particular key priority issue. Yeah. So I think if members give some thought to that, we will most likely utilise that in due course.
Yeah, I completely agree, Chairperson, to make it more targeted. And the Chair was very good when he was just the Deputy Chair, but they were very good at showing up and staying and talking to everybody, and stakeholders really appreciate meeting all of you, and I think they will be quite keen to come up. And
Yeah, I think obviously, as you say, Clark, we had good member engagement,
We did.
and you'd endeavour to have a member, a host at each round table, and then constructive feedback from the issues that have been raised, and then followed up. So I think it is a useful format to have as widespread engagement as possible that is challenging via a tight schedule in committee setting. So we can follow that up, yeah. Is there scope, Clark and members? We have obviously raised the urgency of emotional well-being and mental health. It was scheduled for 18th of March in terms of a briefing from the Department of Education Authority, and that may have been the one where we sought to bring in the Department of Health, the Committee of Health and the Public Health Agency as well. But notwithstanding the time that the planning session may take on week 4, is there scope for, again, notwithstanding the timescales around publication of any 14 to 19 strategy, to maybe look at swapping that with the emotional well-being and health briefing? Would that make sense? Yeah. If we can just check the timescales around the 14 to 19 strategy as well, but there is obviously an extreme urgency to those mental health issues as well. Bring Justin in on that. Yeah.
I second that approach, Chair, and in that context, can we give some attention to the impact of sport and education, the role play for sport and education in terms of building resilience, building preemptively tackling mental health crisis we're facing at the moment.
Yep.
Yeah, can I just make a point on that? I mean, there's a collective in sort of Greater Shankill. There's what's called SAMI, where the 15 football teams have come together around these issues, you know, and produced leaflets, key rings, you know, information in terms of a mural on the wall where there are key contacts for organisations who can help people. The same applies. TAMI over in what would be seen as sort of more nationalist part of North Belfast. Again, I think people like Sammy and TAMI would be key people to talk to the issues that Mr McNulty has just raised.
Chair, are members content maybe to start with an informal meeting where you could get those groups along, and that might actually inform so we would do that, and then we'd get the officials along and just say, what are you doing, kind of thing, so that I'm sure the members are very familiar with the subject matter anyway, but we give other committee members an opportunity maybe to get up to speed with that. So maybe if we scheduled in some informal meetings with groups like TAMI and SAMI or others that members might suggest.
It's not just the external groups, it's within the education system. We've had the curriculum sports programme, obviously, which has been asked recently. What is the education system doing to incorporate sport as a mechanism for building young people's mental health strengths and resilience?
Yep, I'll take some advice from the clerk here, but so week 2 next week is primarily ministerial and departmental briefing. Yep. Week 3 is going to be Education Authority briefing. Week 4, I think, is well placed in terms of planning session to reflect on what we've heard from 2 key providers. Is there time in that week 4 to receive a briefing from the Department of Education on where the wellbeing and mental health strategy is at? In terms of engaging with stakeholders as well, I mean, perhaps that is the theme of one of our first roundtable stakeholder engagement events. In that way, we can maximise the organisations and the bodies that are able to attend for that. But I'd be keen to ensure that we hear from the Department of Education, and that will include the Public Health Agency, because I know they're working together on this emotional wellbeing policy, which will allow us to interrogate some of the issues that Justin has raised as well. And perhaps it is not inconceivable that session can be held in joint session with the Department or the Committee for Health. Do people know when the Committee for Health meets? No. Thursday, is it?
It's Thursday.
Okay. So it may be achievable. I'm going to make a proposal then. Members content that for week 4 Wednesday the 12th of February, we allocate time for our planning, and that we seek to, after that planning session, or before or after that planning agenda item, hold ideally joint committee session with the Committee of Health to receive an urgent update with regards to the emotional wellbeing strategy that is being worked on by Department of Education and the Public Health Agency, and plan to host stakeholder engagement on mental health as soon as possible. Yeah.
Yep.
And then week 5, sorry, I'm stepping in. Clerk here, week 5 did we get to? Yeah, which
Nope.
is Wednesday the 19th.
Yep.
Yep.
So the plan there would be on the Tuesday of that week, we'd hopefully be able to get the special school principals up to talk to us, and then the briefing on the Wednesday would be from the department on the special educational needs framework.
Yeah.
And maybe the Education Authority to talk about what they're doing with the special schools. We've got the framework.
The key
schools,
priority.
quite the same, yeah.
Content. Yep. Okay.
Then following week, early years and our nurture programme. So again, nurture featured in early years as well, both featured in the programme for government, just to see where they've got with those major issues. And then following week, shared integrated education. Plan there would be the department would tell us about that
The
review.
review. Okay.
They
Yep.
did.
Yep.
And it doesn't have to be at this point, but home to school transport. Perhaps something maybe a bit more interest to members in rural constituencies, but there are.
That's a
one
pertinent
of the
issue.
strands,
Yep.
one of the strands of the transformation programme. And then we get to, and probably like these dates of some caution, they're going to be a bit fictional now because the department will say, no, we can't do this.
Fluid.
Yes,
Is the
there we go.
operative word
That's the word I
surrounding this
wanted.
place at the moment. Yeah.
Fluid, yeah, not
Right.
fictional. So we got to children, young people strategy, and somewhere around there, Kulia Suma from Nikki will hopefully come up and tell us about her review of the special educational needs. And then, as I say, so then when we get into March, that will be
14 to
our 14 to
19.
19 strategy, which I think the department will be very pleased about. So,
And maybe we could do that jointly with the Economy
Yes,
Committee if
okay.
appropriate. Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
again, so I'll have to negotiate now with the department and the Education Authority and other committees. So that, as the chair has said, the dates will be a little fluid, but that sounds quite good, a good start, a good going, get us to Easter.
Our
Really?
members, obviously, this isn't about filling dates in a diary. This is about identifying the urgent key priorities in education. I'd like to thank the clerk. I think that's a good first attempt at setting an agenda for us. It is a draft forward work programme. It can be adjusted. If members have comments now, happy to take them. Otherwise, take time to reflect on it, and we can take suggestions at our future meetings as well. Anyone want to respond at this stage? Yep, Daniel.
Just to thank the clerk for the tremendous amount of work that's gone into this, and obviously a very short period of time, a good amount of organising to be done in relation to it, and a huge amount of work and challenge for us all. There's a reference there to meeting the board of the Education Authority. I just know, and I know it's not unique to my constituency, but in any of the principals that I've spoken with across my constituency, there's a huge amount of frustration with the Education Authority. And this committee really will need to grab that bull by the horns very quickly in relation to their approach to schools, to principals, and the attitude as well. And I think that will need to be discussed and addressed in terms of how we move forward, because it's amazing. At the start I thought, well, this is just one unhappy school in relation to some form of a disagreement, but every school I visited over the last 3 years have articulated a huge amount of frustration with the Education Authority and how they conduct themselves.
Yeah, and I think that is reflected in our diarising of a meeting and a briefing from the Education Authority, not next Wednesday, but the week after, and indeed that informal meeting with them on Thursday, the 30th of January at their Antrim location then, yeah. So members will be well placed to present some of those widespread concerns that we've all received. Content with that, members? Yeah. Okay. Any other comments or feedback in relation to that draft forward work programme? Members content for now? Yeah. Okay. Then members, our next item is any other business. If members have any other business they wish to discuss, happy to consider them now. Members content. Clerk, any other business? No. Okay.
Just one item, Chair.
Yep, certainly.
In the absence of the allocation of the tablets for committee members, which won't be done on hold for a few months, how is the best to proceed in terms of putting back on paper and everything else?
Well, I have been advised of different timescales because I would share your concern with regards to the amount of paper that has been required to be produced. Obviously, the Assembly and Assembly staff are responding to a fairly live situation in terms of the restoration of the Executive and Assembly, but I will commit with the clerk to get clear timescales with regards to the provision of electronic access to papers, and provide you with a detailed update in that regard as soon as possible. My hope was that we would be dealing in a week or weeks timescales in reverting to electronic access. Hopefully that will be the case. It is an issue that needs addressed. Yep. Any other members? No. Okay. Then, members, our next committee meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, the 29th of January. Pre-meet at 9:45 a.m. and into open session at 10 a.m. in room 30, Parliament Buildings. Members content that the meeting is now adjourned? Great. Thank you.
Is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30.